Zara Williams stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, her heart beating wildly against her ribs as she clutched the arm of the man beside her. A man who was definitely not her husband. The crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across the marble floor where hundreds of New York's elite mingled in designer clothes worth more than what most people made in a year. Every eye in the room turned toward her, mouths falling open, champagne glasses freezing midway to lips. The whisper started immediately, like a wave crashing through the crowd. Is that Zara? With another man? Does Richard know? She wouldn't dare leave him. Where would she go? Back to working 2 jobs. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. After 7 years of a marriage that looked perfect from the outside but felt like a golden cage, Zara had finally found the courage to leave billionaire tech mogul Richard Porter. And now, 6 months after the divorce that nobody thought would actually happen, she was making her first public appearance. With someone new. Richard Porter stood across the room, his tall frame going rigid as he spotted her. His face, usually composed in business meetings where billions hung in the balance, now betrayed a flash of shock before hardening into something colder. He hadn't believed she would actually come tonight. He certainly hadn't expected her to bring a date. Everyone's staring, Zara whispered to Michael, the kind-eyed teacher who had shown her there was more to life than luxury without love. Let them, Michael replied, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. You have nothing to be ashamed of. But shame wasn't what Zara felt as she took her first steps into the room. It was something more complex, a mixture of fear, pride, and most surprisingly relief. The path that had brought her here had been long and painful. Nobody in this glittering ballroom knew what went on behind the closed doors of her marriage. Nobody knew how it felt to have everything money could buy while slowly losing yourself. Zara had grown up in a small apartment in Brooklyn, the daughter of a hard-working nurse who raised her alone after her father died. She had put herself through college working nights at a diner and weekends at a retail store. That's where she'd met Richard. When his car broke down and he stopped in for coffee while waiting for his driver to arrive with another vehicle. He'd been charmed by her quick wit and genuine smile. So different from the calculated social climbers he usually met. She'd been dazzled by his intelligence and the easy confidence that came from never having to worry about money. Their whirlwind romance had been like a fairy tale, culminating in a wedding that made the society pages despite Richard's family's thinly veiled disapproval. You don't belong here, his mother had told her bluntly at the rehearsal dinner. But Richard is stubborn. Just know that when this ends, and it will end, you'll leave with exactly what you came with, nothing. Those words had haunted Zara throughout her marriage, especially when Richard's warm attention gradually turned to cold indifference. While he built his empire, she tried to fit into his world, enduring the judgment of his social circle, their subtle digs about her background, their surprise that she could hold intelligent conversation. Darling, you look lost in thought, Michael said now, bringing Zara back to the present. We can still leave if you want. Zara took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. No. I'm exactly where I need to be. Across the room, Richard was now coming toward them, his steps measured and purposeful. The crowd parted for him the way they always did, drawn to his power and wealth like moths to flame. This is going to be interesting, Zara said under her breath, feeling both terrified and strangely powerful. She'd spent years thinking she needed Richard's world to be complete. It had taken losing herself completely to realize that wasn't true. The journey back to herself had been the hardest thing she'd ever done, harder than working 2 jobs, harder than earning her degree. But standing here now, she knew it had been worth every painful step. Richard stopped directly in front of them, his expensive cologne familiar yet now somehow suffocating to Zara. His eyes moved from her face to Michael's, then to their joined hands. Zara, he said, voice carefully controlled. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Hello, Richard, she replied, proud that her voice didn't shake. You remember this is my favorite charity. I wouldn't miss it. The annual Children's Hospital Gala had always been important to Zara. During her marriage, she'd thrown herself into charity work, finding purpose in helping others when her own life felt increasingly empty. Richard had always treated her passion as a cute hobby, something to keep his wife busy while he made the real contributions with his checkbook. And who is your friend? Richard asked, though the look in his eyes said he already knew exactly who Michael was. This is Michael Taylor, Zara said. Michael, this is Richard Porter. The 2 men sized each other up. Michael, in his well-tailored but obviously not bespoke suit, offered his hand. Nice to meet you. Richard hesitated just long enough for the slight to be noticed before shaking Michael's hand. Likewise. I understand you're a teacher? The question carried the subtle implication. How could Zara possibly be interested in someone so ordinary after being married to him? 5th grade, Michael confirmed with an easy smile. I love my job. How fulfilling, Richard replied, barely concealing his condescension. Then he turned back to Zara. You look well. Before Zara could respond, a stunning woman in a red dress appeared at Richard's side, possessively taking his arm. Zara recognized Vanessa Hughes, a model-turned-socialite known for dating wealthy men. Richard, darling, everyone's asking for you, Vanessa purred, then pretended to just notice Zara. Oh, it's your ex-wife, isn't it? How brave of you to come tonight. Zara felt Michael tense beside her, but she kept her composure. Vanessa, nice to see you. Richard never could stand being alone for long. Something flashed in Richard's eyes, anger, or perhaps surprise that Zara would speak so boldly. The Zara he had married would have quietly accepted the insult, would have smiled politely while being humiliated. But that Zara was gone. Enjoy your evening, Zara said calmly, guiding Michael away before Richard could respond. As they walked toward the bar, Zara could feel the weight of stares following them. Everyone in this room had a stake in the drama. Some had been Richard's friends who tolerated her, others had been betting on how long until Richard tired of his charity case wife, and a few had been genuinely kind to her but never expected her to leave the wealth and status of being Mrs. Porter. None of them had believed she would actually divorce him. Even fewer believed she would ever find happiness without him. You're the strongest person I know, Michael said quietly when they were far enough away. Zara smiled up at him, feeling truly seen in a way Richard never had. I didn't feel strong when I left. I felt terrified. That's what makes it brave, he replied. The night stretched ahead of them, filled with potential confrontations and whispered judgments. But for the first time since entering Richard's world, Zara felt like she could breathe freely. The road that had brought her here had been long and painful. But as she looked into Michael's eyes, she knew this was just the beginning of her real story. 7 years earlier, when Zara first met Richard Porter, she never imagined how completely he would change her life, or how difficult it would be to find herself again after loving him. The diner where she worked nights was nothing special. Just a clean, well-lit place with decent food and affordable prices. Zara had been picking up extra shifts that month, saving every penny for her final semester of college. When the sleek black car pulled up outside during a rainstorm, she barely noticed. Rich people occasionally wandered in when their careful plans went awry, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the vinyl booths and laminated menus. But Richard Porter had been different. He sat at the counter instead of hiding in a corner booth, ordered black coffee and apple pie without looking at the menu, and actually looked her in the eyes when he thanked her. Car trouble, he explained when she asked if he was just passing through. My driver is bringing another vehicle, but it might be a while in this weather. There was something compelling about him. Not just his obvious good looks and expensive clothes, but the focused way he listened when she spoke as if her words actually mattered. You're studying business and education? He'd asked, noticing the textbook she kept under the counter for slow moments. Interesting combination. I want to start a program teaching financial literacy to kids in underserved communities, she told him, surprised at herself for sharing her dream with a stranger. Where I grew up, nobody taught us how money really works. I think that's why cycles of poverty continue. Instead of the polite nod she expected, Richard had leaned forward, genuinely interested. That's actually brilliant. The banking industry spends millions on financial education that doesn't reach the people who need it most. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily despite their different backgrounds. By the time his new car arrived, he had her phone number and a promise to meet for dinner that weekend. I don't usually do this, Zara had told her roommate Jessie later that night. Go out with customers. Especially not rich ones who probably date models and socialites. Girl, you've been working yourself to exhaustion for years, Jessie replied. Let a handsome billionaire buy you dinner. Just don't expect anything serious. Men like that don't marry women like us. But Richard had defied everyone's expectations, especially his family's. On their third date, he took her to meet his parents at their Connecticut estate, a sprawling property that made Zara feel like she'd stepped into another world. Eleanor Porter had taken one look at Zara's department store dress and simple gold hoop earrings, her mother's, the only real jewelry she owned, and pursed her lips into a thin line. Richard has always had an interest in charitable cases, she said while her son was out of the room. Zara had straightened her spine. I'm not a charity case, Mrs. Porter. I work hard for everything I have. Of course you do, dear, Eleanor had replied with a cold smile. But this isn't a world one simply works their way into. Richard will tire of this phase just like all his other rebellions. But Richard hadn't tired of her. Instead, 14 months after they met, he proposed on a rooftop garden overlooking Central Park, with a diamond ring that cost more than everything Zara had ever owned combined. "I love that you're different," he told her that night. "I love that you see the world clearly, without the cynicism that comes from growing up with too much. You make me want to be better." The wedding had been a fairy tale, or at least that's what the magazines called it. For Zara it had been overwhelming. Her side of the church was sparsely filled, her mother, a few aunts and cousins, college friends and co-workers from the diner. Richard's side overflowed with business associates, socialites and family connections going back generations. The first few years had been good. Richard included her in his business decisions, valuing her perspective. Zara threw herself into charitable work, finally able to implement some of the programs she'd always dreamed about. They traveled the world, lived in a penthouse with views that still took her breath away, and talked late into the night about their hopes for the future. But slowly things began to change. Richard worked longer hours, building his technology empire with single-minded focus. When he was home, he was distracted, often taking calls during dinner or disappearing into his office. The easy conversations they once shared became superficial exchanges about social events and household matters. "We barely talk anymore," Zara said one night, 3 years into their marriage. Richard looked up from his phone, genuinely confused. "We talk all the time. We just discussed the benefit for the children's hospital." "That's not what I mean. We don't talk about real things. About us. About how you feel, how I feel." Richard had sighed, putting down his phone with visible effort. "I'm building something important, Zara. Something that will change lives. I need you to support that." "I do support you. But I need to know I still matter too." "Don't be dramatic," he'd said, his tone dismissive. "Of course you matter. I bought you that necklace you wanted, didn't I? The one from Paris." It was the first time Zara realized Richard thought he could solve emotional problems with money. It wouldn't be the last. As the years passed, the distance between them grew. Richard's circle closed ranks around him. Business partners, old family friends, people who had known him all his life and saw Zara as an interloper. At parties, she increasingly found herself alone while Richard networked, or worse, stuck in conversations where people talked around her as if she couldn't possibly understand their world. "It must be quite an adjustment," they would say with false sympathy, "coming from your background to all this." By their 5th anniversary, Zara felt like a beautiful piece of art Richard had acquired, appreciated from a distance but not engaged with. She had her charities, her few genuine friends, and a growing sense that she was disappearing inside her perfect life. The final breaking point came during a dinner party at their home. One of Richard's business associates made a disparaging comment about people who expect handouts, while discussing a community program Zara had helped develop. "Actually," Zara interjected, "the program is designed to create self-sufficiency through education and mentorship. It's the opposite of a handout." The table had gone quiet. Richard cleared his throat. "Zara has always been passionate about her little projects," he said with an indulgent smile that made her feel 2 inches tall. "Now about the merger." Later that night, when all the guests had gone, Zara confronted him. "You dismissed me in front of everyone. Like what I care about doesn't matter." "You were embarrassing yourself," Richard replied coldly. "You don't understand the complexities of these issues from a business perspective." "I have a business degree, Richard. I worked with community development programs before we met. Just because I didn't grow up with money doesn't mean I don't understand how it works." His expression had been pitying. "There's understanding from books and there's understanding from experience. You'll always lack the latter, Zara. It's not your fault." Something broke inside her that night. The realization that the man she loved, the man she had thought saw her clearly, actually viewed her as inherently less capable because of where she came from. 2 months later, she filed for divorce. The society pages had a field day. "Gold digger gives up golden ticket," read one particularly nasty headline. Richard's family closed ranks, spreading the narrative that Zara had simply failed to adapt to their world. Richard himself seemed more annoyed than heartbroken, offering a generous settlement just to be done with the drama, as he put it. Only Zara's mother had truly understood. "Baby, all the money in the world isn't worth losing yourself," she'd said, holding Zara as she cried. "You deserve someone who loves you for exactly who you are." In the lonely months after the divorce was finalized, as Zara moved into a modest but comfortable apartment and began rebuilding her life, those words had been her lifeline. She had everything she needed to start over, including, most importantly, herself. Then she met Michael Taylor at a fundraiser for the education program she'd finally launched independently. He was there representing his school, passionate about helping his students access better opportunities. He hadn't known who she was at first, hadn't recognized her as the former Mrs. Porter who'd been splashed across gossip columns. He'd just seen Zara. And for the first time in years she felt truly visible. The marble bathroom of the Porter penthouse was larger than the entire apartment Zara had grown up in. Standing before the wall of mirrors one evening in their 4th year of marriage, Zara barely recognized herself. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her dress a fortune of hand-beaded silk. She looked exactly like she belonged in Richard's world. So why did she feel like she was disappearing? "Are you almost ready?" Richard called from the bedroom. "The car is waiting." "Coming," she replied, applying another coat of the lipstick his mother had once told her was more appropriate than the shade she used to wear. Tonight was an important business dinner with potential investors from Japan. Richard had briefed her thoroughly on appropriate topics of conversation and reminded her twice not to get too passionate about her community projects. "These are serious businessmen," he'd explained that morning. "They won't be interested in charity talk." There had been a time when Richard had loved her passion, when he'd introduced her proudly as someone with vision and purpose. Now he seemed to find it embarrassing, a reminder that she wasn't born into his world of wealth and privilege. As she joined him in their living room with its sweeping views of Central Park, Richard gave her appearance a quick, appraising glance. "You look appropriate," he said, which wasn't a compliment but rather confirmation that she wouldn't embarrass him. He didn't touch her. The casual affection of their early relationship had gradually faded until physical contact felt formal, almost scheduled. The dinner unfolded exactly as dozens before it. Zara smiled at the right moments, asked polite questions about the investors' families, and kept her opinions safely neutral. Under the table, she dug her nails into her palm to stay alert as the men discussed profit margins and market expansions as if they were the only things that mattered in the world. When they returned home, Richard was pleased. "They were impressed with you," he said, loosening his tie. "Tanaka mentioned how elegant you are." Once, Zara would have treasured his approval. Now she felt hollow. "Is that all I am to you now? Elegant accessory?" Richard's expression hardened. "Don't start this again. Not when things went so well." "When did we stop talking, Richard? Really talking like we used to?" He sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "We talk all the time." "You're being dramatic again." "No, we don't. We exchange information. We coordinate schedules. We don't talk about dreams or fears or anything real anymore." Richard's phone buzzed with an incoming message, and his attention immediately shifted to the screen. The conversation was already over in his mind before it had really begun. "I need to respond to this," he muttered, walking toward his home office. "Of course you do," Zara whispered to the empty room. Later that night, lying beside her sleeping husband, Zara stared at the ceiling and wondered how much of herself she was willing to erase to keep this life. The young woman who had worked double shifts to put herself through college, who had fierce opinions and bigger dreams, seemed like someone from another lifetime. Someone Richard had once loved but now found inconvenient. The next morning she called her mother for their weekly chat. Patricia Williams had never been comfortable visiting the penthouse, preferring to have Zara come to Brooklyn for their visits. As they talked about neighborhood news and Patricia's job at the hospital, Zara felt the familiar comfort of being with someone who knew her completely. "You sound tired, baby," Patricia said toward the end of their call. "Everything okay with you and Richard?" Zara almost gave her usual answer. That everything was fine, just busy with charity events and Richard's work commitments. Instead, she found herself fighting tears. "I don't think he sees me anymore, Mom. Not the real me." There was a pause before Patricia spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Then maybe it's time you remember how to see yourself." Those words stayed with Zara in the weeks that followed. She began making small changes, enrolling in a business course to refresh the skills she hadn't used since college, reconnecting with friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage, speaking up more at charity board meetings instead of deferring to others. Richard barely noticed these changes at first. He was consumed with a major expansion of his tech company, often working late and traveling frequently. When he was home, he was distracted and remote. It was during this period that Zara met Diane Chin, the new education director at one of the foundations she worked with. Unlike many in Zara's social circle, Diane treated her as a person with valuable insights, not just as Richard Porter's wife. "You have good instincts for program development," Diane told her after a particularly productive meeting. Have you ever thought about taking on a more formal role in the nonprofit sector? The question caught Zara off guard. I'm just a volunteer. Diane gave her a curious look. Why just? Your background in business and education is exactly what many organizations need. Combine that with your passion and connections, you could make an even bigger impact. For the first time in years, someone was seeing Zara's potential beyond her role as Richard's wife. The conversation left her both energized and unsettled, making her question how much she had limited herself. When she tried to discuss the possibility of taking on a paid position with the foundation, Richard dismissed the idea immediately. You don't need to work, Zara. Your name on the board gives the organization credibility. Actually drawing a salary would seem desperate. His tone made it clear this would reflect poorly on him. It's not about the money, she tried to explain. It's about being taken seriously, making a real contribution. Richard looked at her as if she were speaking a language he couldn't understand. You already contribute by hosting fundraisers and attending events with me. That's your role. Your role. The words echoed in Zara's mind long after the conversation ended. When had she agreed to limit herself to being just an extension of Richard's image? When had she accepted that his dreams mattered but hers didn't? As summer turned to fall, the distance between them grew. Richard seemed relieved that Zara had stopped trying to have meaningful conversations, interpreting her withdrawal as acceptance. He didn't notice when she began meeting with Diane regularly to develop a business plan for a new educational initiative. He didn't see how her eyes had begun to light up again when she talked about her ideas. It was at the annual Porter Enterprises holiday party that everything finally shattered. Zara was speaking with the wife of one of Richard's board members when she overheard a conversation from the group of men standing nearby. Porter made quite the interesting choice with that one man said, not bothering to lower his voice. Exotic beauty, yes, but hardly bred for this world. My wife went to school with his ex-fiancée Victoria. Now there was a suitable match. Richard knows what he's doing, another voice replied. Thomas Wells, Richard's closest friend on the board. Zara makes a compelling story for the company's public image. From diner waitress to society wife, the American dream personified. Excellent for press. But I doubt he consults her on anything important. Zara froze, waiting for Richard to defend her. Instead, she heard his familiar laugh. Zara has other qualities, he said in a tone that made the others chuckle knowingly. The humiliation burned through her like fire. Not just because of their crude implications, but because Richard, the man who had once valued her mind and spirit, had reduced her to nothing more than an interesting background story and an attractive body. She set down her champagne glass carefully and walked out of the ballroom without looking back. When Richard found her in the coat check area, he seemed more annoyed than concerned. What are you doing? The Andersons just arrived and they specifically asked to meet you. I heard what you all said, Zara replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Is that really how you see me? As some kind of diversity trophy you picked up at a diner? Richard had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed before his expression hardened. You're overreacting. It was just men talking. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything, Zara said, suddenly seeing with complete clarity. Because you didn't correct them. You agree with them. Don't be ridiculous. I married you, didn't I? Against everyone's advice, including my parents and the board. Do you know what I've put up with because I chose you? The words hit Zara like physical blows. Put up with? As if loving me was some kind of noble sacrifice. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is, Zara interrupted, a strange calm settling over her. You think you elevated me, that I should be eternally grateful you pulled me out of my lower life. You never saw us as equals. Richard's expression confirmed every word. He didn't even try to deny it. I'm going home, Zara said quietly. Don't be dramatic. We have guests. No, Richard. You have guests. People who think I'm a joke, who you allow to disrespect me. I'm going home. For the first time, she saw uncertainty in his eyes, as if he was realizing he might have miscalculated. Zara? Enjoy your party, she said, taking her coat from the attendant and walking out into the cold December night. That night, alone in their massive bedroom while Richard continued entertaining his business associates, Zara made her decision. She couldn't, disappear completely inside this marriage. She deserved more than conditional acceptance. More than being tolerated as Richard's exotic experiment. When Richard finally came home in the early hours of the morning, he found Zara sitting calmly in the living room. I want a divorce, she said without preamble. Richard stared at her for a long moment before laughing dismissively. No, you don't. You're upset about some thoughtless comments. We'll get past this. I don't think we will, Zara replied. Because the problem isn't just what was said tonight. It's that you believe it too. You think you did me a favor by marrying me. Don't be absurd. Where would you even go? Back to Brooklyn? To what? You have nothing without me. There it was, the truth he'd always believed but never stated so plainly before. In Richard's mind, she had nothing of value except what he had given her. I'd rather have nothing that's truly mine than everything that comes with being invisible, Zara said, rising to her feet. I'm staying with my mother tonight. I'll have my lawyer contact yours tomorrow. Richard's expression changed then, from dismissive to coldly calculating. You signed a prenup, Zara. You won't get what you think you will. I don't want your money, Richard. I just want myself back. She packed a small bag and left while he was still trying to process that she was serious. As the elevator descended from the penthouse, Zara felt terror and grief, but underneath it all was something she hadn't felt in years, the first fragile flutters of freedom. The first weeks after leaving the penthouse passed in a blur of legal meetings, tearful nights, and moments of paralyzing doubt. Zara moved into her mother's small two-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, sleeping in her childhood room with its faded posters and narrow twin bed. At 31, she found herself starting over completely. You can stay as long as you need, Patricia told her, fierce protectiveness in her eyes. This is your home. The media frenzy was immediate and brutal. Gold diggers gamble fails, screamed one tabloid headline, while social media buzzed with speculation that Zara was angling for a bigger settlement. Richard's PR team worked overtime to shape the narrative, painting him as the devoted husband blindsided by an ungrateful wife. Few people knew that Zara had asked for only the bare minimum in the divorce. Enough to secure a modest apartment and support herself while she rebuilt her career. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed had been airtight, but she could have fought for more. Instead, she wanted a clean break, even if it meant walking away from the wealth she'd grown accustomed to. You're making a mistake, her divorce attorney had told her bluntly. After 7 years as his wife, you're entitled to more. I don't want anything that keeps me tied to him, Zara had replied. I just want this to be over. Richard couldn't believe she was serious at first. He sent expensive gifts to Patricia's apartment, jewelry, designer clothes, even a car, all returned unopened. When gifts didn't work, he tried intimidation, having his lawyers suggest they could make the divorce very difficult if she didn't reconsider. When that failed, he tried appealing to her practical side during their one face-to-face meeting without lawyers. Be reasonable, Zara, he said, looking out of place in the small conference room they'd chosen as neutral ground. Where will you go? What will you do? You haven't worked in 7 years. I'll figure it out, she replied, surprised at her own calm. I did before I met you. Richard studied her with genuine bewilderment. Is this about the comments at the party? Because I've spoken to Thomas and he's prepared to apologize. This is about the fact that you didn't disagree with him, Zara said quietly. This is about the fact that somewhere along the way you stopped seeing me as your equal. Maybe you never did. For a brief moment, something like regret flickered across Richard's face. Then his expression hardened again. Fine. Have the divorce. But don't come crawling back when you realize how hard the real world is without me. Those words haunted Zara during her first month in a small one-bedroom apartment she rented with part of her settlement. The place was clean and safe but startlingly basic after years of luxury. On her first night alone, she sat on her IKEA sofa, one she'd assembled herself with YouTube tutorials and stubborn determination, and wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed, Richard eager to put the embarrassment behind him. Zara kept her head high through the final proceedings, ignoring the whispers and stares. The society women who had once air-kissed her at charity events now pretended not to see her. The foundation she'd worked with suddenly had restructured boards, with no place for her. It was as if New York's elite had collectively decided she no longer existed. Except for Diane Chin. 2 days after the divorce was final, Diane called. I heard you're officially free, she said without preamble. Are you still interested in making a difference in education? That call led to a coffee meeting, which led to a job offer with the Foundation's new initiative for financial literacy in underserved schools. The salary was modest compared to what Zara had been used to, but it was her own, earned through her skills and knowledge, not given conditionally through marriage. On her first day standing before a classroom of high school students in a Brooklyn public school, Zara felt terrified and exhilarated. These teenagers didn't care that she'd once been Mrs. Richard Porter. They only cared whether she could teach them something useful. Money isn't mysterious, she told them, remembering her own confusion as a teenager trying to understand credit and savings. It's a tool. And I'm going to teach you how to use it. Slowly, painstakingly, Zara rebuilt her life. She worked long hours developing the program, drawing on both her education and her experiences. She reconnected with old friends who had drifted away during her marriage, people who knew the real Zara before designer clothes and society events. Some days were harder than others. She missed small luxuries, the doorman who greeted her by name, the housekeeper who knew exactly how she liked her sheets folded, the ability to buy whatever she wanted without checking her bank balance. Sometimes she would walk past her old favorite stores on Fifth Avenue, places where sales associates had once fawned over Mrs. Porter, and feel a pang of loss. But those moments grew less frequent as she settled into her new routine. There was something deeply satisfying about paying her own bills, about the tired muscles that came from cleaning her own apartment, about the genuine thanks from students who were learning valuable skills through her program. 4 months after the divorce, Zara ran into Thomas Wells, the board member whose comments had been the final straw, at a coffee shop near her office. He did a double take when he saw her, clearly surprised to find Richard's ex-wife in a casual cafe rather than a 5-star restaurant. "Zara," he said, his tone suggesting he was speaking to someone who had suffered a terrible downfall. "How unexpected." "Hello, Thomas," she replied evenly. "How are you?" "Well, thank you." He glanced around the modest cafe as if expecting to find cameras recording her fall from grace. "And you? Are you managing?" The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Once it would have made Zara shrink, made her question whether she truly belonged in Richard's world. Now it just made her sad to realize how narrow that world actually was. "I'm more than managing," she said with a genuine smile. "I'm building something important." His polite disbelief was evident, but Zara no longer cared what Thomas Wells, or any of Richard's circle, thought of her. Their opinion had never been the measure of her worth, though she had allowed herself to believe it was for too long. It was at an education conference 6 months after her divorce that Zara met Michael Taylor. She was presenting a workshop on the financial literacy program, which had expanded to 3 more schools. The room was packed with educators and nonprofit workers eager to learn about the curriculum she developed. From the podium, she noticed a man in the 3rd row who asked thoughtful questions and nodded encouragingly throughout her presentation. When the workshop ended and participants gathered around to ask questions, he waited patiently until the crowd thinned. "That was really impressive," he said, extending his hand. "Michael Taylor. I teach 5th grade at Horizon Elementary in Queens." There was something immediately appealing about him, a genuine warmth in his brown eyes, a quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. Unlike the polished businessmen in Richard's world, Michael had a relaxed authenticity that put Zara at ease. "Thanks for your questions during the presentation," she replied. "They really helped clarify some points. I've been trying to incorporate financial concepts into my classroom for years," he said. "It's so important for kids to learn this early, especially in communities like mine where many families are living paycheck to paycheck." They ended up talking long after the other participants had left, sharing ideas and experiences. Michael had grown up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, the son of a postal worker and a nurse. He'd become a teacher because he believed education was the most powerful tool for changing lives, a belief Zara shared deeply. When he asked if she'd like to continue their conversation over coffee, Zara hesitated. She hadn't dated since the divorce, wasn't sure she was ready. But there was something about Michael that felt safe, undemanding. "Just coffee," he said, seeming to read her hesitation. Professional colleagues sharing ideas. That first coffee led to another and then to dinner the following week. Michael never asked about her marriage to Richard, though Zara was certain he must know. Her divorce had been tabloid fodder for weeks. Instead, he asked about her work, her ideas, her dreams for the future. "You're not what I expected," she told him one evening as they walked through a neighborhood street fair. "What did you expect?" he asked, amused. "I don't know. After everything. I guess I expected men to either want something from me because of who I was married to, or to treat me like damaged goods." Michael stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Zara, I don't care who you were married to. I care about who you are. And from what I've seen, you're someone pretty extraordinary." For the first time since leaving Richard, Zara felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. Michael wasn't impressed by designer labels or exclusive restaurants. He got excited about new teaching methods and community programs. He lived in a modest apartment filled with books and plants, coached Little League on weekends, and seemed genuinely happy with his life. He was real in a way Richard's world had never been. Their relationship developed slowly over the next few months, built on friendship and mutual respect. Michael never pushed for more than Zara was ready to give, understanding that she was still healing from her marriage. "Take all the time you need," he told her when she explained her hesitation to get too serious too quickly. "I'm not going anywhere." But while Zara was cautiously building something new with Michael, her past wasn't done with her. 6 months after their first meeting, Richard re-entered her life with all the subtlety of a hurricane. It began with a call from Diane. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "No, I've been in meetings all day." "What's happening?" "Porter Technologies is launching a foundation focused on financial literacy in underprivileged communities." Zara felt like someone had dumped ice water over her. The initiative sounded suspiciously like the program she had developed, the one she was currently expanding with considerable success. "There's more," Diane continued. "They've hired Victoria Hamilton to run it, Richard's ex-fiancée from before you." The message couldn't have been clearer. Richard was replacing Zara's project with a bigger, better-funded version led by the society woman he'd dated before her. The woman his family had always preferred. It was a power move designed to overshadow Zara's work and remind her of his reach and influence. When she checked the news later, every business publication was praising Richard Porter's visionary new foundation. None mentioned that his ex-wife had been running a similar program for months. It was as if her work had been erased. That night, alone in her apartment, Zara felt the old doubts creeping back. How could she compete with Richard's resources? Would funders continue supporting her program when a flashier version backed by Porter Technologies was available? Had everything she'd built since the divorce been for nothing? When Michael called to check in, she almost didn't answer. Part of her wanted to retreat, to lick her wounds in private. But something made her pick up. "I saw the news," he said gently. "Are you okay?" The simple question, and the genuine concern behind it, broke the dam. Zara found herself pouring out her fears and frustrations. "He's trying to erase me," she finished, wiping angry tears. "To prove I can't succeed without him." There was a pause before Michael spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Zara, listen to me. What you've built is real. Your program has actually helped hundreds of kids already, not just made promises in press releases. Your curriculum is being adopted by schools across the city because it works. No amount of money can buy that kind of credibility." His unwavering belief in her was like a lifeline. "You really think so?" "I know so. And you know what else? Tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and keep doing the work just like you have been. Because that's who you are, someone who doesn't quit when things get hard." For the first time, Zara realized that Michael truly saw her, not as Richard Porter's ex-wife, not as a project or a trophy, but as a woman of substance and strength. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me." The next morning, Zara walked into her office with renewed determination. Richard might have more money and media connections, but she had something he couldn't buy: authentic passion for the work and relationships with the communities she served. Over the next weeks, she channeled her frustration into expanding her program, bringing on new schools and refining the curriculum based on feedback from teachers and students. Where Richard's foundation held glossy launch parties with celebrities, Zara held community workshops where parents learned alongside their children. Gradually, education reporters began noticing the differences between the two programs. Articles appeared comparing Porter Technologies' top-down approach with the grassroots success of Zara's initiative. Schools began reporting impressive results from her curriculum, with students showing measurable improvements in financial knowledge and behavior. 3 months after Richard's foundation launched with great fanfare, Zara received an unexpected email from Victoria Hamilton herself, requesting a meeting. "I should refuse," Zara told Michael as they discussed it over dinner. "She's probably just gathering intelligence for Richard." Michael considered this. "Maybe. Or maybe she's realizing their approach isn't working as well as yours. Either way, I think you're strong enough to handle whatever this is." His faith in her was unwavering, and Zara found herself drawing strength from it. The woman who had been intimidated by Richard's world no longer existed. In her place was someone who knew her own value. Victoria Hamilton was exactly as Zara had imagined, polished, poised, and perfectly at ease in the upscale restaurant she'd chosen for their meeting. What Zara hadn't expected was the hint of respect in Victoria's eyes as she outlined the reason for her invitation. "Our program isn't connecting with students the way yours does," she admitted after preliminary pleasantries. "The curriculum looks impressive on paper, but teachers are struggling to implement it effectively. What does Richard say about that? Zara asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Victoria's smile was tight. Richard has moved on to other projects. He loses interest quickly when things don't show immediate results. That sounded like the Richard she knew, impatient with anything that didn't yield quick success. Why are you telling me this? Zara asked. Because I think there's an opportunity here, Victoria replied. Your program works. Ours has funding and connections. I'm proposing a partnership. The offer was unexpected but intriguing. Working with Porter Technologies would give Zara's program resources to expand nationally, potentially reaching millions of students instead of thousands. I'd need complete control over curriculum development, she said, testing Victoria's sincerity. And proper credit for the work my team has already done. Agreed, Victoria said without hesitation. This isn't about egos, it's about creating something that actually helps kids. As they hammered out details, Zara realized Victoria was nothing like she'd imagined. Rather than a society wife-in-waiting, she was a shrewd businesswoman who had recognized a failing strategy and wasn't too proud to change course. For what it's worth, Victoria said as their meeting concluded, I always thought Richard was a fool to let you go. You have exactly what his foundation needs, genuine connection to the communities we're trying to serve. The partnership was announced the following month, with both women sharing the spotlight at a press conference. Richard was conspicuously absent, having prior commitments according to his PR team. The business press covered the merger as a smart strategic move. Only those closest to the situation recognized it as the victory it truly was for Zara. That night, celebrating with Michael at a small neighborhood restaurant, Zara felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced since before her marriage fell apart. I'm proud of you, Michael said, raising his glass in toast. Not because you partnered with Porter Technologies, but because you did it on your own terms. I couldn't have done it without you, Zara replied, meaning it completely. His steady support had been her foundation during the hardest months. Michael shook his head. You absolutely could have. You're the strongest person I know, Zara. I'm just grateful I get to be part of your journey. As she looked at him across the table, this kind, intelligent man who loved her for exactly who she was, Zara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Completely, authentically happy. 6 months into their partnership, the expanded financial literacy program was thriving in schools across 5 states. Zara frequently traveled for work, overseeing implementation and training local educators. Michael supported her success wholeheartedly, never threatened by her growing professional reputation. It was after returning from one such trip that Zara found an unexpected envelope in her mail, an invitation to the annual Children's Hospital Gala, an event she had chaired during her marriage to Richard but hadn't attended since the divorce. Are you going to go? Michael asked when she showed him the invitation. Zara hesitated. I'm not sure. That world feels like a lifetime ago. Would it help to have moral support? He offered. I own a decent suit. I promise not to embarrass you by using the wrong fork. His teasing made her smile, easing the tension she felt at the thought of facing Richard's social circle again. You could never embarrass me. But are you sure? Those events can be pretty stuffy. I'm sure, Michael said simply. Besides, I think it would be good for you to go back on your own terms. Show them all how well you're doing. Zara realized he was right. Avoiding the gala would look like she was still hiding, still affected by the divorce. Going back as her authentic self, with a man who truly valued her, would be the final step in reclaiming her narrative. And so, 2 years after leaving Richard Porter's world behind, Zara found herself preparing to step back into it, not as the cautious, uncertain woman who had once tried so hard to fit in, but as someone who finally knew her own worth. The Children's Hospital Gala had always been held at the Plaza Hotel, in a ballroom that seemed designed specifically to showcase wealth and status. As their taxi pulled up to the entrance, Zara felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. Second thoughts? Michael asked, squeezing her hand gently. No, she said, drawing strength from his steady presence. Just memories. The last time she'd attended this event, she'd been Mrs. Richard Porter, wrapped in designer silk and diamonds, playing a role she'd grown increasingly uncomfortable in. Tonight, she wore a simple but elegant black dress she'd purchased with her own money, beautiful, but nothing that would strain her teacher boyfriend's comfort when he insisted on paying for dinner before the gala. You look stunning, Michael told her, his admiration evident. Unlike Richard's calculating appraisals, Michael's appreciation was wholehearted and genuine. As they approached the entrance, Zara spotted familiar faces, society women who had once air-kissed her at events, business associates of Richard's who had treated her with condescending politeness. Many did double takes when they recognized her, their gazes sliding curiously to Michael. The whispers started immediately. Is that Zara Williams? Richard's ex. Who's the man with her? Definitely a downgrade from Porter. Once, such comments would have made Zara shrink inside herself, questioning whether she belonged. Tonight, she walked past them with her head high, Michael's hand warm and reassuring against her back. Inside the ballroom, the gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in one corner while New York's elite mingled, more interested in being seen than in the children's hospital the event was supposedly supporting. Quite a scene, Michael murmured, taking it all in. I feel like I should be wearing a name tag that says, public school teacher, just to watch people's reactions. His humor helped ease Zara's tension. The food is usually excellent, she told him with a smile. Though probably not worth the ticket price. Good thing we were comped as partners of the foundation, Michael replied, guiding her toward the bar. Otherwise my teacher's salary might have required a second mortgage. They had just received their drinks when Diane Chin appeared, elegant in midnight blue. Zara. You came. She embraced Zara warmly before turning to Michael with a friendly smile. And you must be the famous Michael. Zara speaks very highly of you. All lies, I assure you, Michael replied with an easy charm that made Diane laugh. How are things going with Victoria? Zara asked. The foundation partnership had been running smoothly, with Victoria handling the business side while Zara focused on program development. Surprisingly well, Diane said. She's nothing like I expected. Much sharper, less society princess. She lowered her voice slightly. And speaking of surprises, you should know that Richard is here. With Vanessa Hughes. Zara had expected as much. Richard never missed high-profile charity events, especially ones that generated press coverage. Thanks for the heads-up. He's by the South Entrance, Diane added. If you want to avoid a direct encounter. Michael touched Zara's arm lightly. We can leave if you'd prefer. No, Zara said firmly. I have every right to be here. We both do. As they moved through the crowd, Zara was surprised by how many people approached her warmly. Teachers from schools where her program had been implemented, board members. From other educational foundations, even a few society mothers whose children had benefited from the financial literacy curriculum. Your work is making a real difference, one woman told her earnestly. My son actually understands how to budget now. I think that's more valuable than his entire private school education. Each positive interaction helped Zara realize something important. She had created her own place in this world. One based on genuine accomplishment rather than reflected status. The respect she received tonight was earned, not borrowed from her husband's position. They were speaking with the hospital's chief of pediatrics when Zara felt a shift in the energy of the room. Without turning, she knew Richard had spotted her. Years of marriage had attuned her to his presence, a awareness that hadn't completely faded despite their separation. Zara. His voice was exactly as she remembered, confident, measured, with that hint of authority he used to establish dominance in any conversation. Zara took a deep breath before turning to face him. Richard Porter looked exactly the same, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Michael's monthly salary, his dark hair showing just a touch of distinguished gray at the temples. Beside him stood Vanessa Hughes, stunning in a dress that seemed designed to display both her model figure and the enormous diamond pendant that rested just above her plunging neckline. Hello, Richard, Zara replied, proud that her voice sounded calm and steady. Nice to see you. His gaze moved from her face to Michael, assessment obvious in his expression. I don't believe we've met. Michael Taylor, Michael said, extending his hand with an ease that surprised Zara. He showed none of the intimidation most people felt around Richard Porter. Richard hesitated just a fraction too long before shaking Michael's hand, a calculated slight that Michael seemed not to notice or care about. Michael teaches 5th grade, Zara explained, watching Richard's eyebrow lift slightly at this information. He's also been instrumental in developing the community engagement aspects of our financial literacy program. Ah yes, the program, Richard said with practiced politeness. Victoria speaks highly of your contributions. Vanessa gave Zara a look that managed to be both dismissive and pitying. Richard was just telling me about your arrangement. How nice that you found a way to stay connected to the foundation. The implication was clear. In Vanessa's view, Zara should be grateful that Richard's organization had absorbed her little project, rather than proud of creating something valuable enough to be worth partnering with. Before Zara could respond, Michael spoke up. Actually, the foundation approached Zara because her program was outperforming theirs in every measurable outcome. The arrangement, as you put it, has been tremendously beneficial, particularly for the foundation's credibility with educators. His tone was pleasant but matter-of-fact, neither confrontational nor intimidated. Richard's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he clearly considered beneath his notice. Yes, well, success requires both vision and resources, Richard replied smoothly. Fortunately, Porter Technologies can provide both. Vision, absolutely, Michael agreed with a genuine smile. That's why Zara's leadership has been so crucial. Her approach resonates with students because it's grounded in real understanding of their needs. Zara felt a surge of affection for Michael. Unlike her, he hadn't spent years being subtly undermined by Richard and his circle. He simply stated truths as he saw them, unaffected by the power dynamics that had once controlled her life. Richard seemed momentarily unsure how to respond to someone who wasn't playing by his social rules. Before he could formulate a reply, they were interrupted by the event chairperson. Richard, just the man I was looking for. The hospital director wants a photo with you for the press. She nodded politely to the others. Excuse us, please. As Richard and Vanessa moved away, Zara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You okay? Michael asked quietly. More than okay, she replied, surprised to find it was true. Facing Richard had been easier than she expected, largely because of the man standing beside her now. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? He said simply. The rest of the evening passed more pleasantly than Zara could have imagined. She reconnected with people who genuinely valued her work, introduced Michael to key contacts in the education field, and even enjoyed the dinner and entertainment. Richard and Vanessa remained across the room, holding court among business associates and society friends. Occasionally, Zara caught Richard watching her, his expression unreadable. Once, their eyes met briefly across the crowded ballroom, and Zara was surprised to see something that looked almost like regret in his gaze before he turned away. Near the end of the evening, as they were preparing to leave, Victoria Hamilton approached their table. Successful night, she said, nodding toward the donation total displayed on screens around the room. We've raised more than last year. That's wonderful news for the hospital, Zara replied. Victoria hesitated, then lowered her voice. I wanted to tell you something. The board is extremely pleased with our program's results. They've approved expansion to 15 more states next year. She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usually composed features. They've also approved my recommendation that you be named Executive Director for Program Development, with a corresponding salary increase. The news took Zara by surprise. Wow, thank you. Don't thank me. You've earned it, Victoria said simply. She glanced across the room to where Richard was speaking with donors. Not everyone supported the recommendation, but the results speak for themselves. After Victoria left, Michael raised his glass. Congratulations, Executive Director Williams. Well deserved. As they clinked glasses, Zara felt a profound sense of vindication. She had rebuilt her career on her own terms, earned recognition based on her work rather than her marriage, and found someone who supported her success without feeling threatened by it. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand through the quiet streets toward Zara's apartment, Michael asked the question she'd been considering herself. How did it feel, being back in that world? Zara took a moment to find the right words. Like visiting a foreign country where I used to live. Familiar but not home anymore. She squeezed his hand. I'm glad I went though. It helped me realize how much I've changed, how much happier I am now. Michael stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious in the glow of the streetlight. Zara, there's something I've been wanting to tell you for a while now. The earnestness in his voice made her heart skip. What is it? I love you, he said simply. Not because of who you were or what you've accomplished. Just you, exactly as you are. The words washed over her like warm sunlight after years of cold shadow. With Richard, love had always felt conditional, dependent on how well she played her role, how perfectly she fit his image of what a wife should be. With Michael, love felt like freedom. I love you too, she whispered, the words coming easily, naturally. So much. As they continued walking, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Leaving Richard had been the hardest thing she'd ever done, but also the most necessary. Without that painful break, she would never have found her way back to herself, never have created meaningful work, never have opened her heart to the kind of love that nourished rather than diminished. Sometimes she realized you had to lose everything to find what truly mattered. Spring in New York brought a burst of new beginnings. Trees in Central Park exploded with pale green buds, daffodils pushed through soil in tiny gardens, and Zara Williams found herself busier than ever. The financial literacy program was thriving under her leadership, expanding to schools across the country. Her relationship with Michael had deepened into something solid and nurturing that made her previous marriage seem like a beautiful but hollow shell. Life was good, better than she had imagined possible during those dark days after leaving Richard. Then came the news that shook her carefully rebuilt world. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by Diane during their weekly strategy meeting at the foundation offices. "Richard Porter is getting married again," Diane said without preamble, sliding a tablet across the conference table. On the screen was a society page announcement featuring Richard and Vanessa Hughes, her left hand prominently displaying an enormous diamond ring. Zara stared at the image, surprised by her own lack of emotion. There was no jealousy, no regret, just a mild curiosity and perhaps a touch of pity for Vanessa, who clearly didn't know what she was getting into. "The wedding is set for June at his family's estate in Connecticut," Diane continued, watching Zara carefully for her reaction. "It's already being called the society event of the season." "Good for them," Zara said, handing back the tablet. "Now about the new curriculum modules." Diane looked startled by her casual response. "That's it? No reaction to your ex getting remarried?" Zara smiled, realizing how much she had truly moved on. "What reaction were you expecting? Richard and I have been divorced for almost 2 years. He's free to marry whoever he wants. I guess I thought you might feel something, given how it all ended." "I do feel something," Zara admitted. "Relief. Richard was never going to change. Vanessa knows exactly what she's getting into. A man who wants a beautiful accessory, not a partner. If that works for her, I wish them well." Later that day, when she told Michael about the engagement, his response was characteristically thoughtful. "Are you okay with it?" he asked as they prepared dinner in her apartment kitchen, a domestic scene that had become wonderfully routine. "More than okay," Zara replied, chopping vegetables with practiced ease. "It feels like the final chapter of that part of my life is closing. Like I can finally stop being Richard Porter's ex-wife, and just be Zara Williams." Michael smiled, pulling her into a brief hug before returning to the pasta he was stirring. "You've always been Zara Williams to me. The most impressive, compassionate, determined woman I know." His words warmed her heart as they always did. With Michael, she never doubted her worth or questioned whether she belonged. Their relationship wasn't flashy or dramatic, just deeply supportive and genuine. The news of Richard's engagement faded from Zara's thoughts until 2 weeks later, when she received an unexpected call from Victoria Hamilton. "I need to meet with you," Victoria said, her usually composed voice tense. "Today if possible. It's important." They arranged to meet at a small cafe near the foundation offices, away from the usual business lunch spots where they might be recognized. When Zara arrived, Victoria was already there, an untouched coffee in front of her and a troubled expression on her face. "What's going on?" Zara asked as she slid into the booth. "You sounded worried on the phone." Victoria glanced around the cafe before leaning forward. "I've discovered something concerning. Richard is planning to restructure the foundation after his wedding. He wants to shift focus away from the financial literacy program." The news hit Zara like a physical blow. "But why? The program is successful by every metric." "That's the problem," Victoria said grimly. "It's too successful, and too closely associated with you. From what I've gathered, Vanessa doesn't like the constant reminders of Richard's ex-wife. She's been pushing him to create something new that will be identified with her instead." "That's ridiculous," Zara protested. "This program helps thousands of students. It's not about me or Vanessa or Richard. It's about giving kids tools they desperately need." "I agree completely," Victoria said. "Which is why I'm telling you this. Richard hasn't announced anything officially yet. There's still time to protect the program." "How?" Zara asked, her mind racing. The program was her life's work, the achievement she was most proud of. The thought of it being dismantled for something as petty as a new wife's jealousy was unbearable. "I have a proposal," Victoria said. "One that would separate the program from Porter Technologies but ensure its continued funding and growth." Over the next hour, Victoria outlined a bold plan. She had been quietly approaching other foundations and corporate donors who believed in the program's mission, building a coalition willing to establish an independent nonprofit with Zara at the helm. Porter Technologies would transfer the program's assets and provide transition funding, allowing for a clean break that would benefit everyone. Richard gets to please Vanessa by removing your influence from his foundation. You get complete control of the program without his interference. The program itself continues to grow and help students. Everyone wins, Victoria concluded. Zara was stunned by the thoroughness of Victoria's preparation. Why are you doing this? Won't it hurt your position with Richard? Victoria's smile was wry. Richard and I have a complicated history. But more importantly, I believe in what we've built. I'm not willing to see it destroyed because of personal politics. She hesitated before adding, besides, I'm ready for a change myself. If this works, I'd like to join you in the new organization. The prospect was both exciting and terrifying. Independence would mean greater freedom but also greater responsibility. Zara would be stepping completely out of Richard's shadow, building something that was entirely her own. I need to think about this, she said finally. And talk to Michael. Of course, Victoria replied. But we need to move quickly. Once Richard makes an official announcement, our leverage decreases significantly. That evening, Zara explained everything to Michael as they walked through a neighborhood park, the setting sun casting long shadows across the grass. What do you think I should do? She asked after outlining Victoria's plan. Michael considered the question carefully. I think you already know what you want to do. You're just looking for reassurance. As always, he saw through to the heart of the matter. You're right, Zara admitted. I want to do this. Build something truly mine without Richard's name or money attached. But it's scary. Of course it's scary, Michael said gently. All important changes are. But Zara, I've watched you rebuild your life from scratch after leaving Richard. You're more than capable of leading this new organization. His faith in her was unwavering, a steady light that helped her see her own strength more clearly. What about us? She asked, voicing her deeper concern. A new organization would mean even longer hours, more travel. I don't want to sacrifice what we have. Michael stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Listen to me. What we have isn't fragile. It won't break because you're pursuing your passion. We'll make it work just like we have with everything else. In that moment, looking into his eyes, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she loved this man with a depth and authenticity she had never experienced with Richard. Michael didn't want to own her or shape her into someone more convenient. He wanted her to flourish, to become the fullest version of herself. Okay, she said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. I'm going to do it. The next 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings, legal consultations, and strategic planning. Victoria proved to be an invaluable ally, navigating the complex politics of separating the program from Porter Technologies. Corporate donors responded enthusiastically to the prospect of an independent organization focused solely on financial education, many increasing their commitments. Through it all, Michael remained Zara's rock, listening to her concerns, celebrating small victories, and reminding her to rest when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Richard's reaction to the proposal was surprisingly muted. According to Victoria, he seemed almost relieved to have an elegant solution that would please Vanessa while avoiding negative publicity. The agreement was finalized with minimal drama. A clean break that would allow both Richard and Zara to move forward without further entanglement. On the day the papers were signed establishing the new Freedom Financial Literacy Foundation, with Zara as executive director and Victoria as chief operating officer, Michael surprised her with a small celebration at her apartment. He had cooked her favorite meal, opened a bottle of champagne, and invited Diane and a few close friends to mark the occasion. To new beginnings, he toasted, raising his glass. And to the amazing woman who made them possible. As their friends clinked glasses and cheered, Zara felt a profound sense of completion. The journey from Richard Porter's wife to an independent woman leading her own organization had been long and often painful. But standing here now, surrounded by people who valued her for herself, she wouldn't change a moment of it. Later that night, when their friends had gone and they were alone in the quiet apartment, Michael took her hand and led her to the small balcony overlooking the city lights. I have something to ask you, he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. Zara's heart quickened as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Unlike Richard's elaborate rooftop proposal with its enormous diamond and professional photographer, this moment was intimate and genuine, just like their relationship. Michael opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring with a modest diamond flanked by sapphires. I know it's not as fancy as what you had before, he began. It's perfect, Zara interrupted, tears filling her eyes. Absolutely perfect. Michael smiled, visibly relieved. Zara Williams, I love you exactly as you are. You're the strongest, most remarkable person I've ever known. Will you marry me? Yes, she whispered without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, just like them, Zara marveled at how differently this proposal felt from Richard's. That one had seemed like the culmination of a fairy tale, this one like the beginning of a true partnership. I don't want a big society wedding, she told him as they held each other close. Just something small and meaningful with the people who really matter to us. Whatever makes you happy makes me happy, Michael replied, kissing her forehead. Big, small, or just the two of us at City Hall, as long as we're together. News of their engagement spread quickly among friends and colleagues. Congratulations poured in, genuine and warm. Even Victoria seemed genuinely pleased when Zara showed her the ring. You deserve this happiness, she said sincerely. Both of you. The only response that truly surprised Zara came in the form of a small package delivered to her office a week after the news became public. Inside was an antique book on financial education from the early 1900s, a rare find that perfectly aligned with her professional interests, and a simple card with Richard's distinctive handwriting. Congratulations on your engagement. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. R. The note was unexpected, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that he understood what had been missing in their marriage and recognized she had found it with Michael. There was no bitterness or condescension in the words, just a simple good wish from someone who had once been an important part of her life. Zara placed the book on her office shelf, not hidden away, but not given special prominence either. It was, she realized, the perfect metaphor for how Richard now fit into her life, a closed chapter that had shaped her but no longer defined her future. The small garden behind Michael's mother's house in Queens was transformed for their wedding day. Paper lanterns hung from tree branches, wildflowers spilled from mismatched vases on simple wooden tables, and a white arch covered with roses marked the spot where Zara and Michael would exchange vows. It was nothing like Zara's first wedding, no celebrity florist, no designer gown, no society photographers. Instead, Michael's cousins had strung the lights, Zara's mother had arranged the flowers with help from neighbors, and Diane had baked the cake. The only professional was a former student of Michael's who had become a photographer and offered her services as a wedding gift. Are you nervous? Patricia asked as she helped Zara with the final touches to her simple ivory dress in Michael's childhood bedroom, now converted to a guest room. Not at all, Zara replied, surprised to find it was completely true. I keep waiting for wedding jitters, but all I feel is peaceful. Patricia smiled, adjusting the small crystal pins in her daughter's hair. That's because this time it's right. Marriage should feel like coming home, not like putting on a performance. Zara hugged her mother tightly, grateful for the woman who had raised her with such clear-eyed wisdom. I love you, Mom. Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Always have, always will, Patricia replied, blinking away tears. Now let's get you married before I ruin my makeup. Downstairs, 50 of their closest friends and family members gathered in the garden. The crowd was a mix that would have seemed bizarre during Zara's marriage to Richard. Teachers from Michael's school, colleagues from the foundation, Zara's childhood friends, Michael's large extended family, and even Victoria, who had become a genuine friend over the months they'd worked together building the new organization. As the simple ceremony began, Zara walked alone down the aisle between rows of chairs. She had decided against having anyone give her away. She was giving herself, freely and completely, to this partnership. Michael waited for her under the rose arch, his eyes shining with tears when he saw her. Unlike Richard, who had been concerned with how his bride would look in wedding photos, Michael seemed overwhelmed simply by the sight of Zara herself. You're beautiful, he whispered when she reached him. So are you, she replied, meaning it with her whole heart. Their vows were simple and honest. No flowery promises or poetic metaphors, just straightforward commitments to support each other, to communicate openly, to face life's challenges together, and to cherish the love they had found. I promise to see you, the real you, every day of our lives together, Michael said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. To celebrate your victories as my own, to stand beside you through hard times, and to never take for granted the gift of your love. I promise to remember that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect appearances, Zara responded. It's about showing up for each other day after day, about building something real together, and about helping each other become our best selves. When they exchanged rings, simple bands that fit their budget and their values, Zara felt none of the anxious excitement of her first wedding. Instead, there was a deep contentment, a certainty that she was exactly where she belonged with exactly the right person. The celebration afterward was joyful and relaxed. Children played on the grass, older family members told stories, and friends from different parts of their lives found common ground in conversation. There was dancing to a playlist Michael's students had helped create, featuring everything from classic love songs to current hits. "This is what a wedding should be," Diane told Zara as they took a moment away from the festivities. "People who actually care about each other celebrating real love." Zara nodded, watching Michael laugh with his father and brothers across the garden. "I keep thinking about how different this feels from my first wedding. That felt like an accomplishment, like I'd won some kind of prize. This feels like the beginning of a partnership." As evening fell and lanterns glowed in the gathering darkness, Zara and Michael shared a quiet moment alone, sitting on the porch steps away from their guests. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Completely," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "You know what's strange? I'm actually grateful for everything that happened with Richard." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Really? Even the bad parts?" "Even those," Zara confirmed. "If I hadn't gone through all that, I might never have learned what I really needed in a relationship. I might not have become strong enough to build a life on my own terms. And I might not have recognized how special you are when we met." Michael kissed her gently. "Well, when you put it that way, I suppose I should be grateful to him too." Their honeymoon was simple by society standards. A week in a rented cottage on a quiet beach in North Carolina. No luxury resorts or exotic destinations, just peaceful days exploring tidal pools, reading books on the sand and talking late into the night. On their last evening, as they walked along the shore watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "You know, when I left Richard, I thought I was giving up everything," she told Michael, their fingers intertwined as waves washed over their bare feet. "The beautiful apartment, the lifestyle, the security. I was terrified of starting over with nothing." "And now?" Michael asked. "Now I realize I didn't end up with nothing. I ended up with everything that actually matters." She squeezed his hand. "A career I believe in, work that makes a difference, people who love me for myself. And you?" When they returned to New York, life settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. They moved into a slightly larger apartment equidistant from Michael's school and Zara's foundation offices. Their home was furnished with a mix of budget finds, hand-me-downs, and a few carefully chosen pieces they'd saved for. It wasn't a showcase like the Porter penthouse had been, but it was warm and lived in and truly theirs. Books filled the shelves, plants thrived on windowsills, and the refrigerator door displayed children's artwork from Michael's students alongside reminders and takeout menus. The fall brought both challenges and triumphs. The Freedom Financial Literacy Foundation continued to grow, with programs now running in 15 states. Zara traveled frequently, sometimes exhausted but always fulfilled by the work. Michael was promoted to curriculum coordinator at his school, a role that recognized his innovative teaching approaches. They supported each other through late nights of lesson planning and grant writing, celebrated small victories and talked through disappointments. Unlike her marriage to Richard, where success had been measured in acquisitions and social status, their partnership valued growth, connection, and purpose. News of Richard and Vanessa's lavish society wedding appeared in all the major publications. Zara saw the photos, Vanessa radiant in a custom designer gown, Richard distinguished in his tuxedo, the ceremony dripping with luxury at his family's estate. Once, such images would have triggered insecurity or regret. Now, Zara simply wished them well and turned the page. Her own happiness was too genuine to be shadowed by comparison. She had discovered that love wasn't about being someone's perfect accessory or fitting into a prescribed role. It was about being fully yourself with someone who cherished that truth. 6 months after their wedding, on a snowy Sunday morning as they lingered over coffee and the newspaper, Michael looked up with an expression that made Zara's heart skip. "What is it?" she asked, recognizing the mix of excitement and nervousness in his eyes. "I've been thinking," he began, "about our future. About family." Zara set down her coffee cup, suddenly understanding. "You want to talk about children?" Michael nodded. "I know we both agreed we wanted kids eventually. I'm just wondering if, eventually, might be getting closer to now." The prospect both thrilled and terrified Zara. During her marriage to Richard, the topic of children had become increasingly fraught. He had wanted heirs but seemed uninterested in the actual work of parenting. Zara had been relieved when pregnancy didn't happen, unsure she wanted to raise children in such an emotionally distant home. With Michael everything was different. She had seen him with his students, witnessed his natural ability to connect with children, to guide them with both kindness and clear boundaries. She could imagine their child surrounded by love, growing up in a home where feelings were honored and mistakes were learning opportunities. Yes, she said softly. I think, eventually, is starting to look a lot like now. The joy that bloomed on Michael's face confirmed she had made the right decision. They agreed to stop using birth control and see what happened, both excited but also content to let nature take its course. 3 months later, as spring returned to the city, Zara discovered she was pregnant. The positive test filled her with a mixture of elation and anxiety so powerful she sat on the bathroom floor for several minutes, trying to process her emotions. When she finally emerged to tell Michael, who was grading papers at the kitchen table, words failed her. Instead, she simply handed him the test, watching as understanding dawned in his eyes. Really? He whispered, looking up at her with wonder. We're going to have a baby? Zara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. We are. His reaction was everything she needed, pure joy tinged with the same healthy nervousness she felt. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, one hand resting reverently on her still flat stomach. I love you so much, he murmured against her hair. Both of you. The pregnancy brought a new dimension to their relationship. Michael attended every doctor's appointment, read parenting books alongside Zara, and spent weekends transforming their small second bedroom into a nursery. Unlike Richard, who had delegated most aspects of home life to staff or to Zara, Michael was fully engaged in creating their shared life. When they learned they were having a daughter, they spent evenings discussing names, finally settling on Amara, a name that meant eternal in some cultures and beloved in others. Perfect for our little girl, Michael said as they lay in bed one night, his hand resting protectively over Zara's growing bump. Someone who will always be loved. As Zara's due date approached, she scaled back her travel for the foundation, focusing on administrative work she could do from their apartment. Victoria stepped up admirably, taking on more public-facing responsibilities and proving herself an even more valuable partner than Zara had anticipated. You've built something that can function without your constant presence, Victoria observed during a meeting at Zara's apartment. That's the mark of a true leader. The observation brought unexpected comfort. Unlike the dependency Richard had fostered in their relationship, Zara had created systems and partnerships built on mutual respect and shared vision. Her work, like her marriage, was strong enough to thrive even as she temporarily shifted focus. Amara Rose Taylor Williams arrived on a warm September evening after 20 hours of labor. She was perfect, tiny fingers, a tuft of dark hair, eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the universe. As Zara held her daughter for the first time, Michael beside them with tears streaming unashamedly down his face, she felt a love more powerful than anything she had experienced before. Hello, beautiful girl, she whispered. We've been waiting for you. The first months of parenthood tested them in ways neither had anticipated. Sleepless nights, breastfeeding challenges, and the constant uncertainty of new parenthood pushed them to their limits. But unlike her marriage to Richard, where difficulties had driven them apart, these challenges seemed to strengthen Zara and Michael's bond. They took turns with middle-of-the-night feedings, learned together how to soothe their daughter's colic, and held each other through moments of overwhelming fatigue. When Zara struggled with postpartum anxiety, Michael arranged for extra help and ensured she got the support she needed. We're a team, he reminded her during a particularly difficult night. Always. Parenthood changed them both, deepening their connection and clarifying what truly mattered. The foundation continued to thrive under Zara's part-time leadership and Victoria's capable management. Michael adjusted his schedule to maximize time with Amara. Their life wasn't perfect. Their apartment felt increasingly cramped, money was sometimes tight and balance remained elusive, but it was rich with genuine happiness. When Amara was 4 months old, an unexpected invitation arrived, to the annual Children's Hospital Gala. Zara hadn't attended since that pivotal night 2 years earlier when she had returned to Richard's world on her own terms. Now the foundation she led was being honored for its work with the hospital's financial education program for families of chronically ill children. We don't have to go, Michael said when she showed him the invitation. Victoria could accept the award. Zara considered this as she rocked Amara to sleep. No, I think we should attend. The program is important and besides. She smiled down at their sleeping daughter. I think it's time to introduce our little girl to the world. The night of the gala marked another full-circle moment. Zara wore a simple but elegant dress that flattered her post-baby figure, while Michael looked handsome in his best suit. Patricia came to their apartment to babysit, assuring them she and her granddaughter would be fine for a few hours. The Plaza Hotel ballroom looked exactly as Zara remembered, opulent and glittering with New York's elite in attendance. But this time she entered without a trace of anxiety, her hand comfortably in Michael's. People who had once viewed her as Richard Porter's questionable choice of wife now approached to congratulate her on the foundation's success. Former acquaintances who had disappeared after her divorce now eagerly inquired about her family and work. Zara accepted their attention graciously but without particular investment in their approval. When it was time for the award presentation, Zara and Michael made their way to the stage. As she stood at the podium looking out at the crowd, Zara felt none of the intimidation that had once made her feel small in these surroundings. "Thank you for this honor," she began, her voice steady and confident. "The work we do at the Freedom Financial Literacy Foundation is about empowering people to take control of their financial futures, regardless of their starting point. Every child deserves to grow up understanding that their worth isn't determined by their wealth, and every family deserves the tools to build security and dignity." As she spoke about the program's impact, Zara caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd, including, unexpectedly, Richard and Vanessa Porter seated at a prominent table near the front. Richard's expression was unreadable, but he nodded slightly when their eyes met, a small acknowledgement of her achievement. After the ceremony, as Zara and Michael mingled with supporters and donors, she was surprised when Victoria approached with Richard and Vanessa in tow. "Congratulations on the award," Richard said formally. "The program is doing important work." "Thank you," Zara replied, genuinely appreciative of the recognition. "The hospital partnership has been particularly meaningful." An awkward silence followed until Vanessa, appearing slightly uncomfortable, spoke up. "I understand you recently had a baby. Congratulations to you both." "Thank you," Michael said warmly, pulling out his phone. "Would you like to see a picture? I warn you though, once I start showing baby photos, it's hard to get me to stop." His easy manner broke the tension, and to Zara's surprise, both Richard and Vanessa leaned in to look at photos of Amara. There was something surreal about watching her ex-husband, a man who had once been at the center of her world, cooing over pictures of the daughter she had with another man. "She's beautiful," Vanessa said, seeming genuinely moved. "You must be very proud." "We are," Zara replied, exchanging a loving glance with Michael. "She's changed our lives completely." For a brief moment, she thought she saw something like wistfulness cross Richard's face before his usual composed expression returned. "Well, we won't keep you," he said, stepping back. "Enjoy your evening." As they walked away, Michael squeezed Zara's hand. "You okay?" "More than okay," she assured him. "It just feels final somehow. Like the last piece falling into place." Later that night, as they returned home to relieve Patricia and check on their sleeping daughter, Zara reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. She had once believed that leaving Richard meant losing everything important: status, security, belonging. Instead, it had been the first step toward finding what she truly needed: love without conditions, work with meaning, and the courage to be authentically herself. Standing in the nursery doorway watching Michael gently adjust Amara's blanket, Zara felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This was what real wealth looked like. Not the cold luxury of the Porter penthouse, but the warm, messy, joyful abundance of being truly loved. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked as they readied for bed, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About how everyone bet I would never leave Richard," Zara replied. "And how it was the best decision I ever made." Michael drew her into his arms. "Their mistake was thinking you needed him more than you needed yourself. And their bigger mistake was underestimating what I'd find on my own," she added, pressing a kiss to his lips. "You, Amara, the foundation, a life that's truly mine." As they drifted toward sleep, Zara thought about the frightened woman who had packed a single bag and left a penthouse with no clear plan beyond escaping a marriage that was slowly erasing her. That woman could never have imagined the joy waiting on the other side of her fear. The fulfilling work, the genuine love, the family created not from obligation but from choice. Everyone had bet this poor black lady would never divorce her billionaire husband. They had been wrong about that, and about everything that would follow. The real wealth had been within her all along, waiting for the courage to claim it. 3 years passed in a blur of milestones and everyday moments. Amara grew from a babbling infant into a spirited toddler with her mother's determined expression and her father's gentle eyes. The foundation expanded its reach to over 30 states, earning national recognition for its innovative approach to financial education. Michael was promoted to assistant principal at his school, his natural leadership abilities finally receiving formal acknowledgement. Life wasn't perfect. They faced the same challenges as any working parents trying to balance careers and family. There were nights when both collapsed into bed too exhausted to talk, mornings when getting everyone fed and dressed felt like an impossible mission, weekends interrupted by work emergencies. But underneath the everyday stresses ran a current of deep contentment, a shared understanding that they were building something meaningful together. On Amara's third birthday, they hosted a small party in the community garden near their apartment. Children ran through sprinklers in the summer heat while parents chatted in the shade of fruit trees planted by neighborhood volunteers. It was simple but joyful, exactly the kind of celebration Zara wanted for her daughter. "She's thriving," Patricia said, watching Amara organize her little friends into an impromptu dance circle. "That child knows exactly who she is and isn't afraid to show it." "Wonder where she gets that from," Michael teased, bumping Zara's shoulder gently with his own. Zara laughed, but her mother's observation lingered. She wanted her daughter to grow up with the confidence and self-knowledge that had taken Zara herself so long to reclaim after years of slowly disappearing in Richard's shadow. That night, after Amara was finally asleep amid the chaos of new toys and birthday decorations, Zara and Michael sat on their small balcony sharing a glass of wine. "I've been thinking," Michael said, his expression thoughtful in the glow of string lights they'd hung for ambience, "about making a change." Something in his tone made Zara set down her glass. "What kind of change?" "Our apartment is getting tight for the three of us. Amara will need her own proper room soon, not just a converted office space." He took a deep breath. "I thought maybe it's time to consider leaving the city." The suggestion wasn't entirely unexpected. They'd discussed it abstractly before. The challenges of raising a child in Manhattan on their combined salaries, the appeal of more space and possibly better schools. But something about Michael's tone suggested he had moved beyond abstract consideration. "You have a specific idea in mind?" Zara guessed. Michael nodded. "Remember Jim Costner, my college roommate? He's the principal at that K-8 school in Montclair now. He called last week about an opening for Director of Curriculum Development. The pay is actually better than my current position, and Montclair has great public schools for when Amara's ready for kindergarten." "New Jersey," Zara said quietly, testing how the idea felt. She'd lived in New York her entire life, first in Brooklyn with her mother, then in Manhattan with Richard, and now in their cozy apartment that perfectly split the distance between their workplaces. "It's only a 30-minute train ride to Manhattan," Michael added. "You could still work at the foundation offices most days if you wanted. Or we could look at remote options. Victoria has been handling so much of the day-to-day operation already." Zara knew he was right. Victoria had indeed taken on increasing responsibility, freeing Zara to focus on program development and strategic partnerships. The foundation had matured to the point where it no longer required her physical presence every day. Still, leaving New York felt monumental, like closing another chapter of her life. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Not because I'm against the idea, but because it's a big change." "Of course," Michael agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need. Jim knows I can't make a decision without discussing it with you first." That was another difference from her marriage to Richard, Zara reflected later. With Richard, major decisions had increasingly become announcements rather than discussions. Michael truly saw them as equal partners, neither assuming the right to dictate the other's life. Over the next week, Zara researched Montclair extensively, its neighborhoods, community programs, commuting options to Manhattan. She talked with Victoria about adjusting her role at the foundation, possibly shifting to 3 days in the office and 2 working remotely. She even arranged to visit the town with Michael one Saturday while Patricia watched Amara. Montclair surprised her with its diversity, cultural amenities, and welcoming atmosphere. They toured a few homes in their price range, modest compared to many in the area, but spacious by their New York standards. One in particular caught Zara's attention, a century-old 3-bedroom with a fenced backyard, walking distance to a park and elementary school. "I can see us here," she admitted as they wandered through the empty rooms, sunlight streaming through windows that needed updating but offered beautiful views of mature trees. "Amara would have space to play. We could have a real dining room for family meals." Michael's expression was hopeful but restrained. "We don't have to decide today. There are other towns, other options." But something about this place felt right to Zara. Not as a compromise or a retreat from the city, but as the natural next step in their journey together. "I think we should do it," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "You should take the job. We should move here." "Are you sure?" Michael asked, searching her face for any sign of hesitation. Your whole life has been in New York. My whole past has been in New York, Zara corrected him gently. But our future can be wherever we choose to build it. This feels right, Michael. A good place for Amara to grow up, better balance for all of us. 2 months later, they closed on the Montclair house and began the process of transitioning their lives. Michael started his new position immediately, commuting from Manhattan until their move was complete. Zara worked with Victoria to restructure her role at the foundation, while also preparing Amara for the changes ahead. Moving day was organized chaos, friends helping load boxes, Patricia fussing over whether they had packed enough warm clothes for New Jersey winters, Amara running excitedly through empty rooms shouting to hear her echo. By evening, when the moving truck was finally empty and their friends had departed with promises to visit soon, the three of them sat on the floor of their new living room eating pizza straight from the box. This is our home now, Amara announced with 3-year-old solemnity, pizza sauce ringing her mouth. Yes, it is, little one, Michael agreed, wiping her face with a napkin. What do you think of it? Amara considered the question with endearing seriousness. I think it's big and I think it's ours and I think I love it. Zara exchanged a smile with Michael over their daughter's head. Out of the mouths of babes, the perfect summary of this new beginning. The adjustment period had its challenges. Michael thrived in his new position but faced the learning curve of any new workplace. Zara balanced remote work with commuting to Manhattan, sometimes questioning whether they had made the right decision during particularly exhausting train rides. Amara missed her city playground friends but quickly made new connections at the local library's toddler programs. Slowly their house became a home. They painted walls together, planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard, and found favorite spots in their new community, a family-owned bakery that made incredible sourdough, a hiking trail with a stream where Amara could splash on hot days, a coffee shop where the owner soon knew their usual orders. 6 months after their move, as summer turned to fall, Zara was preparing for an important presentation when her phone rang with a call from Victoria. Have you seen the business news? Victoria asked without preamble. No, I've been focused on the Kennedy Foundation proposal all morning, Zara replied, immediately concerned by Victoria's tone. What's happening? Richard Porter is selling Porter Technologies. The announcement just went public. The news was shocking. Porter Technologies had been Richard's life's work, the foundation of his identity and status. Selling the company seemed unthinkable. Did they say why? Zara asked, surprised by her own curiosity. Richard's business decisions had ceased to affect her life years ago, yet she couldn't help wondering what had prompted such a dramatic move. The official statement talks about pursuing new opportunities and focusing on family, but industry sources are suggesting there's more to it. Victoria paused. Rumor has it Vanessa is pregnant after several rounds of IVF, and Richard wants to step back from the day-to-day stress of running the company. The information struck Zara with unexpected force. During their marriage, Richard had occasionally mentioned wanting children someday, but always as a distant future event, something to consider after the next acquisition or expansion. The idea that he would reshape his entire professional life for family seemed utterly out of character for the man she had known. Good for them, she said finally, meaning it sincerely. Perhaps Richard had changed, or perhaps Vanessa had succeeded where Zara had failed in making him re-evaluate his priorities. Either way, Zara harbored no resentment. Only a mild curiosity about the road not taken. That evening, as she watched Michael and Amara building a block tower on the living room floor, Zara reflected on how differently her life had unfolded from what she had once imagined. The young woman who had been dazzled by Richard Porter's wealth and confidence could never have pictured this modest home in New Jersey, this career built on her own terms, this family created from genuine love rather than social expectation. Mama, look. Amara called, placing the final block atop a surprisingly stable structure. We built a castle. It's beautiful, sweet pea, Zara replied, joining them on the floor. What lives in your castle? A queen and a king and a princess, Amara declared. The princess has superpowers and the queen runs a big important business and the king teaches all the children in the kingdom. Michael caught Zara's eye over their daughter's head, his smile acknowledging the transparent family parallel in Amara's imagination. There was something profoundly moving about their child unconsciously casting her mother as a queen with a big important business, seeing Zara's work as central to her identity rather than secondary or incidental. It was exactly what Zara hoped to model for her daughter. That women could be mothers and professionals, that relationships should be partnerships, that real wealth came in many forms beyond money. As fall turned to winter, their life in Montclair continued to deepen and expand. Zara and Michael made friends with other parents, joined a community garden project, and established new traditions for their small family. The foundation continued to thrive under Zara's vision and Victoria's day-to-day leadership, expanding to new states and securing long-term funding partnerships. In February, Zara received an unexpected email from a New York Times business reporter wanting to interview her for a feature on successful nonprofit leaders who had left corporate careers. The request was flattering but also prompted reflection. Was that really how others saw her story? As a corporate executive who had chosen a more meaningful path? The narrative erased so much of her actual journey. The waitress who had put herself through college, the woman who had rebuilt her life after divorce, the mother balancing family and purpose. After careful consideration, Zara agreed to the interview with one condition: that it focused not just on her career transition but on the foundation's mission and impact. The reporter seemed intrigued by this stipulation, perhaps recognizing a story more complex than she had initially imagined. They met at a cafe in Manhattan on a day Zara was in the office. The reporter, Emma Chin, a thoughtful woman in her early 30s, asked insightful questions about the foundation's approach to financial education and Zara's vision for its future. As the conversation progressed to more personal territory, Zara found herself sharing aspects of her journey she rarely discussed publicly. "Many people still identify you primarily as Richard Porter's ex-wife," Emma observed. "Does that frustration you?" Zara considered the question carefully. "It used to," she admitted. "For a long time after the divorce, I was working to reclaim my own identity separate from that relationship. But honestly, now it's just a footnote in my story, an important chapter that helped shape me, but not the defining one." "And what would you say is the defining chapter?" Emma asked. "I don't think there is just one," Zara replied. "That's part of what I hope our foundation teaches young people. That your life isn't defined by a single relationship or decision or circumstance. It's an ongoing story that you have the power to shape, even when external factors limit your choices." The resulting article, published a month later, was thoughtful and nuanced. Rather than focusing on Zara as a society wife who had left wealth behind, it portrayed her as a determined woman who had consistently prioritized authenticity and purpose throughout various phases of her life. The piece highlighted the foundation's work while touching only briefly on her marriage to Richard, framing it as one of many experiences that had informed her approach to financial education. Michael framed the article and hung it in their home office. "A keeper," he declared. "Amara will be proud to read this when she's older." The thought of her daughter someday reading about her journey brought Zara a deep sense of satisfaction. She wanted Amara to understand that her mother's story wasn't about escaping a billionaire or choosing a simpler life. It was about having the courage to pursue genuine happiness even when others thought she was making a mistake. As spring bloomed in their new neighborhood, bringing color to the garden they had planted together, Zara found herself reflecting on the 5 years since she had left the Porter penthouse with a single suitcase and no clear plan beyond escaping a marriage that was slowly erasing her. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but each step, however uncertain at the time, had brought her closer to a life of authentic purpose and joy. On a warm Saturday afternoon, as Michael coached Amara's t-ball team at the local park and Zara watched from the sidelines with other parents, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Glancing down, she saw the headline, "Porter Hughes welcome baby girl." The announcement was accompanied by a professionally staged photo of Richard and Vanessa with their newborn daughter, looking every bit the perfect society family. 5 years ago, such an image might have triggered complicated emotions in Zara: regret, inadequacy, even relief that she hadn't raised a child in that gilded but emotionally arid world. Today she felt only a simple, genuine hope that the little girl would be loved for herself, not as an extension of her parents' image or expectations. Looking up from her phone to where Amara was attempting to hit a ball off a tee with Michael's patient guidance, Zara felt a wave of gratitude for the path her life had taken. She had once believed that leaving Richard meant losing everything important. Instead, it had been the first step toward finding what she truly needed: work with meaning, love without conditions, and the courage to be authentically herself. Later that evening, as they walked home from the park with a tired but happy Amara between them, holding both their hands and occasionally swinging between steps, Michael noticed Zara's thoughtful expression. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked over their daughter's head. Zara smiled, watching Amara's delight as she spotted a neighborhood cat lounging on a garden wall. "I was just thinking about how everyone bet I would never leave Richard. How they all assumed I'd be lost without him. And instead," Michael prompted, "instead I found myself." Zara squeezed both their hands, her husband's strong, steady grip and her daughter's small, trusting fingers. And in finding myself, I found everything else that matters. Autumn in Montclair painted their neighborhood in brilliant shades of red and gold. Amara, now in kindergarten, collected fallen leaves with scientific precision, carefully pressing her favorites between wax paper with Michael's help. Zara divided her time between foundation work and family life, finding a balance that felt sustainable if not always perfect. Autumn in Montclair painted their neighborhood in brilliant shades of red and gold. Amara, now in kindergarten, collected fallen leaves with scientific precision, carefully pressing her favorites between wax paper with Michael's help. Zara divided her time between foundation work and family life, finding a balance that felt sustainable if not always perfect. Their routine was comfortable but never boring: school drop-offs and pickups, foundation meetings, community events, family movie nights, and weekend adventures to nearby parks and museums. The house had become truly theirs, with each room reflecting their personalities and shared history. Amara's artwork covered the refrigerator, Michael's books filled the built-in shelves in the living room, and Zara's small home office overlooked the garden they had planted together. It was during this peaceful period that the unexpected invitation arrived. A formal envelope addressed to both Zara and Michael, the heavy cream-colored paper instantly recognizable as the kind used for significant social events. "What's this?" Michael asked as Zara opened it at the kitchen table one Saturday morning while Amara focused intently on her cereal. Zara's expression shifted from curiosity to surprise as she read the card inside. "It's an invitation to the 10th anniversary gala for the Porter Technologies Foundation." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Richard's foundation? Why would they invite us?" "Not just an invitation," Zara clarified, scanning the accompanying note. "They want me to be one of the honored speakers. Apparently, they're recognizing key figures who have contributed to financial education over the past decade." The request was unexpected but not entirely shocking. After the merger of their programs years earlier, Zara and Victoria had maintained a professional relationship with the Porter Foundation even as Zara launched her independent organization. The financial literacy curriculum she had developed was still used by both entities, adapted for different settings but sharing the same core principles. "Are you going to accept?" Michael asked, his tone carefully neutral. Zara hesitated, setting the invitation on the table. "I'm not sure. What do you think?" "I think your work deserves recognition," he replied thoughtfully. "And I think you're secure enough in who you are now that seeing Richard again won't throw you off balance." His assessment was accurate. The young woman who had once been intimidated by Richard's world, who had struggled to maintain her identity in his shadow, no longer existed. In her place was someone who knew her own value, who had built a life and career on her own terms. "I'd want you there with me," she said. Michael smiled. "Wouldn't miss it. We can get your mom to watch Amara for the night." After careful consideration, Zara accepted the invitation and began preparing brief remarks for the event. The gala would be held at an upscale hotel in Manhattan, bringing her back to the social world she had once been so desperate to fit into, and later, so relieved to leave behind. The night of the gala, as Zara slipped into an elegant but simple navy dress, she caught herself reflexively worrying whether it was appropriate enough for Richard's circle, then laughed at the old habit. Those concerns belonged to a different woman, a different life. "You look beautiful," Michael said as he adjusted his tie, the admiration in his eyes genuine and warm. Unlike Richard's calculating appraisals, which had always felt like assessments of whether she would reflect well on him, Michael's compliments came from pure appreciation of her. "So do you," she replied, brushing an imaginary piece of lint from his shoulder. Michael had purchased the suit for his job interview in Montclair 3 years earlier, his first new suit since their wedding. On him it looked better than any designer label ever could. The drive into Manhattan sparked nostalgic memories, both good and bad. Zara had loved the energy of the city, the sense of possibility that hummed beneath the concrete and steel. She hadn't loved the social pressure, the constant awareness of being judged and found wanting by Richard's circle. "Strange to be going back as guests rather than hosts," she commented as they approached the hotel. During her marriage, she and Richard had attended countless similar events, often as primary sponsors or organizers. "Better this way," Michael replied, squeezing her hand. "We get to enjoy the free food and then go home to our real life." The ballroom was elegantly decorated, with subtle lighting and tasteful floral arrangements. As they entered, Zara immediately recognized the carefully choreographed atmosphere of high society charity events. The strategic seating arrangements, the calculated mingling, the unspoken competition conveyed through designer labels and family jewels. Victoria spotted them almost immediately, crossing the room with genuine pleasure. You came. I wasn't sure you would. She embraced Zara warmly before shaking Michael's hand. Thank you for agreeing to speak. It means a lot to have you here. As Chief Operating Officer of the Porter Foundation, Victoria had maintained a professional friendship with Zara over the years, their initial partnership evolving into mutual respect and occasional collaboration. She looked elegant as always, but with a confidence that hadn't been fully formed when they first met. The program looks impressive, Zara commented, glancing at the evening's agenda. 10 years is quite a milestone. We've built on strong foundations, Victoria replied meaningfully. Your curriculum is still the backbone of everything we do, you know. We've expanded and adapted it, but the core principles remain the same. The acknowledgement was gratifying. Zara had sometimes wondered whether her work had been gradually erased from the foundation after she left, her contributions minimized or forgotten. Hearing Victoria confirm its lasting impact validated the years of effort she had poured into the program. As they continued chatting, Zara became aware of a subtle shift in the room's energy. The kind of ripple effect that happened when someone important arrived. Without turning, she knew Richard had entered. Victoria noticed her slight tension. He's been looking forward to seeing you, she said quietly. For what it's worth, he's changed a lot since you knew him. Before Zara could respond, she felt a familiar presence behind her. Taking a deep breath, she turned to face her ex-husband. Richard Porter looked both the same and different, the same commanding physical presence and impeccable grooming, but with new lines around his eyes and a softness to his expression that hadn't existed during their marriage. Zara, he said, his voice warmer than she remembered. Thank you for coming. And Michael, good to see you again. To Zara's surprise, Richard extended his hand to Michael first, the gesture conveying genuine respect rather than the condescension of their previous meeting. Michael shook it without hesitation, his natural ease unaffected by the wealth and power Richard represented. Congratulations on 10 successful years, Michael said sincerely. The foundation's work has made a real difference for a lot of kids. Richard nodded, something like humility crossing his features. We've been fortunate to have good people guiding the mission. He turned to Zara. Including you at the beginning. That's why I wanted you here tonight, to acknowledge that none of this would exist without your vision. The frank acknowledgement took Zara aback. During their marriage, Richard had rarely credited others for his success, viewing accomplishments through the lens of his own abilities and decisions. Thank you, she replied, finding her composure. The program has always been about the students, not about any of us. I'm glad it's continuing to reach those who need it. Just then, a striking woman in a simple but obviously expensive black dress approached, a young girl of about 4 holding her hand. Zara recognized Vanessa instantly, though parenthood had softened her former model sharpness into something more approachable. Zara, Michael, Richard said, his expression warming further. You remember my wife Vanessa. And this is our daughter Lily. The little girl regarded them solemnly, her features a perfect blend of her parents' good looks. Unlike Amara, who had been a whirlwind of energy and curiosity at that age, Lily seemed carefully restrained, already aware, perhaps, of the expectations that came with being a porter. Hello, Lily, Zara said, crouching slightly to meet the child at eye level rather than towering over her. It's very nice to meet you. Lily gave a small, practiced smile. Hello. Are you the lady who writes the money books for kids? The question, clearly rehearsed but still endearing, made Zara smile. Yes, that's part of what I do. Do you like learning about money? Lily nodded seriously. Daddy says I have to understand it to be responsible. That's very true, Michael chimed in with the natural warmth he showed all children. Our daughter Amara is just a little older than you. She has a special bank with 3 sections. One for saving, one for spending, and one for sharing with others. Lily's eyes widened with interest. Can I have one like that? The adults laughed, breaking the remaining tension. Vanessa placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. Perhaps we can look into that, sweetheart. She looked at Zara with genuine respect. Your curriculum has been wonderful. I've been using the parent guide with Lily. The conversation might have continued, but the event coordinator approached to remind Richard that the program would be starting soon. With a polite nod, he and his family moved toward the head table. Well, that was surprisingly pleasant, Michael murmured as they found their own table. He seems different, Zara acknowledged, still processing the interaction. Less arrogant, Michael suggested with a slight smile. I was going to say rigid, but yes, that too. The formal program began with Richard delivering a welcome speech that struck a different tone than Zara remembered from his public addresses during their marriage. Where he had once been all polished confidence and subtle self-promotion, he now spoke with reflective appreciation for the Foundation's partners and genuine passion for its mission. When it was Zara's turn to speak, she approached the podium with calm confidence. Looking out at the audience, many of whom had once been part of her social circle as Richard's wife, she felt none of the anxiety that had plagued her at similar events during her marriage. 10 years ago, I had a simple vision, she began. To create a program that would teach children not just how to manage money, but how to understand its true value and limitations. To help them see that wealth comes in many forms: knowledge, relationships, purpose, community, and that financial literacy is a tool for building a meaningful life, not an end in itself. As she continued her brief remarks, acknowledging the collaboration between her current organization and the Porter Foundation, Zara caught Richard watching her with an expression she had rarely seen during their marriage: genuine respect, without the condescension that had gradually infected their relationship. The evening progressed smoothly, with other speakers highlighting various aspects of the Foundation's work. During a break in the program, Zara excused herself to visit the restroom and was surprised when Vanessa Hughes Porter entered just behind her. For a moment, they stood in awkward silence before Vanessa spoke. "I wanted to thank you privately," she said, her usual poise giving way to something more vulnerable. "Not just for coming tonight, but for the program you created. It's made a real difference for so many children." "I appreciate that," Zara replied, genuinely touched by the acknowledgement. Vanessa hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "And I wanted to thank you for something else, though it might sound strange. Richard is different from the man you were married to. Better. More present, more willing to listen." She met Zara's eyes directly. "I think losing you forced him to examine himself in ways he never had before." The candid admission startled Zara. She had never considered that her departure might have catalyzed positive growth in Richard. Had always assumed he had simply moved on to another woman who would better fit his expectations. "I'm glad," she said sincerely. "For all of you, but especially for Lily. Every child deserves parents who are fully present." Vanessa nodded, seeming to understand the deeper meaning behind Zara's words. "She's the center of his world now. Of both our worlds. It took years of trying before we had her. Treatments, specialists, disappointments. By the time she was born, Richard had sold the company, restructured his life completely. He says he doesn't want to make the same mistakes twice." There was no accusation in her tone, just a simple acknowledgement of the past and how it had shaped their present. As they returned to the ballroom, Zara felt a weight lifting that she hadn't even realized she was still carrying. Some lingering doubt about whether leaving Richard had been selfish or necessary. When the formal program concluded, guests began mingling more freely. Richard approached their table again, this time alone. "I was hoping we might have a moment to talk," he said to Zara, his manner respectful rather than demanding. "Perhaps by the terrace? The view of the city is quite remarkable from there." After a questioning glance at Michael, who nodded encouragingly, Zara followed Richard to a quieter area near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. For a moment, they stood in silence, taking in the glittering panorama of the city where they had once shared a life. "Do you miss it?" Richard asked suddenly. "The city, I mean." Zara considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. The energy, the possibilities. But Montclair has been good for us. More space for Amara, a garden, a different pace." Richard nodded, seeming to understand. "We moved to Connecticut, near my family's estate, but in a house that's just ours. Vanessa wanted Lily to have space to run, trees to climb." He smiled slightly. "Things I never considered important until they became important to my daughter." The admission revealed how much he had indeed changed. The Richard that Zara had married had been singularly focused on his company, his status, his vision of success. Family considerations had always been secondary, adjustable to fit his primary ambitions. "Parenthood changes us," Zara acknowledged. "If we let it." "Yes," Richard agreed quietly. "If we let it." He turned slightly to face her directly. "I owe you an apology, Zara. Many apologies in fact, but we can start with one. I didn't see you, the real you, during our marriage. I saw what I wanted to see, what fit my narrative. I never truly understood what I had until you had the courage to leave." The words were everything Zara had once longed to hear: acknowledgement of how invisible she had felt, validation of her decision to save herself. Now, years removed from the pain, she could receive them with grace rather than resentment. "Thank you for saying that," she replied simply. It means more than you might imagine. Richard's expression was thoughtful as he gazed out at the city again. I've had a lot of time to reflect since selling the company. On what matters, what doesn't. On the kind of father I want to be to Lily. He paused. The kind I wasn't prepared to be when we were together. We were different people then, Zara said, finding it surprisingly easy to be generous. Both of us. I hadn't fully found my voice yet. You certainly have it now, Richard observed with genuine admiration. Your speech tonight was remarkable, clear, passionate, authentic. No wonder the program has been so successful. They talked a while longer, exchanging updates on their lives with the easy rapport of old friends rather than the tension of former spouses. Richard spoke of his new focus on strategic philanthropy, his commitment to being home for dinner with Lily every night, his gradual reconnection with simple pleasures that his driven younger self had dismissed as unimportant. Zara shared stories of the foundation's growth, Amara's kindergarten adventures, and the community they had built in Montclair. As they talked, she realized that whatever power Richard had once held over her, the ability to make her question her worth, to make her feel like an outsider in his world, had completely dissipated. They were simply two people who had once shared a significant chapter of life, now moving forward on separate but respectable paths. When they returned to the main gathering, Michael was engaged in animated conversation with Victoria about educational approaches in different school districts. He looked up as Zara approached, his eyes asking a silent question. Are you okay? She nodded slightly, feeling a deep appreciation for this man who supported her without controlling her, who understood her need for closure without feeling threatened by her past. As the evening wound down, Zara and Michael prepared to leave, saying goodbye to various acquaintances and colleagues. When they reached Richard and Vanessa, the farewell was surprisingly warm. Please give our best to Amara, Vanessa said sincerely. Perhaps someday the girls might meet. I imagine they could learn a lot from each other. We'd like that, Michael replied, his natural openness making the suggestion seem reasonable rather than awkward. Richard shook Michael's hand, then Zara's, holding hers a moment longer than necessary. Thank you again for coming tonight. For everything, really. The simple gratitude in his eyes spoke volumes, acknowledgement of all she had contributed, not just to the foundation but to his own growth, however indirectly. The drive back to Montclair was quiet, both of them processing the evening's unexpected emotional currents. As they crossed the bridge leaving Manhattan, the city lights reflecting on the dark water below, Michael broke the silence. So, he said casually. That was Richard Porter 2.0. Zara smiled at his characterization. Apparently fatherhood and selling his company did what I never could, made him reconsider his priorities. Are you okay? Michael asked, briefly taking his eyes off the road to study her expression. That was a lot of history to navigate in one evening. Zara thought carefully before answering. I'm more than okay, she said finally. I feel complete somehow. Like a circle closing properly. She reached for his hand on the console between them. Seeing Richard as he is now, with his family, his new perspective, it just confirms that leaving was the right choice. Not just for me but for him too. Michael squeezed her hand gently. You gave him an important gift even if neither of you realized it at the time. The chance to become a better version of himself. We gave that to each other, Zara corrected softly, and found the people we were meant to be with in the process. When they arrived home, Patricia was dozing on the couch with a novel open on her lap. She stirred as they entered, immediately asking about the event while helping them hang up their coats. It was actually really nice, Zara told her mother. Surprisingly healing in a way I wasn't expecting. Sometimes that's how closure works, Patricia observed wisely. It shows up when you're not looking for it anymore, when you've already moved forward. After checking on Amara, who was fast asleep surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals, Zara and Michael prepared for bed in the comfortable routine they had established over years together. His careful hanging of the suit that would return to the closet until the next special occasion, her removal of earrings and bracelet, the quiet exchange of observations about the evening. Do you ever wonder how differently things might have turned out? Michael asked as they settled beneath the covers, his tone curious rather than insecure. If you had stayed with Richard, if he had changed while you were still together? Zara considered the question seriously, appreciating that Michael was secure enough in their relationship to ask it. Sometimes, she admitted, but not with regret. More with recognition. That life unfolds exactly as it needs to. Richard and I needed to separate to become the people we are now. I needed to find myself before I could truly find you. Michael drew her closer, his presence solid and reassuring as always. Well, I'm certainly glad you found me. So am I, Zara whispered, resting her head against his chest. Every single day. As she drifted towards sleep, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the frightened woman leaving a penthouse with a single suitcase to the confident professional and mother she was today. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but each step had led her exactly where she needed to be. Everyone had bet that poor black lady would never divorce her billionaire husband. They had been wrong about that, and about everything that would follow. She hadn't just survived without Richard Porter. She had thrived, built something meaningful, found authentic love, and created a family grounded in mutual respect and genuine connection. And somehow, miraculously, the story had a happy ending not just for her but for everyone involved. Richard had found his way to a more balanced life with Vanessa and Lily. Zara had created her true home with Michael and Amara. Two separate journeys, two families, two versions of happiness that could now acknowledge each other with respect rather than resentment. Some might call it luck, but Zara knew better. It was the natural result of courage. The courage to leave what wasn't working, to face uncertainty, to build something new on more solid foundations. The courage to bet on herself when no one else would. 5 years later, on a bright spring morning, Zara stood at the podium in a conference center filled to capacity with educators, financial professionals, and community leaders from across the country. At 43, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her worth and her purpose. 10 years ago, we launched the Freedom Financial Literacy Foundation with a simple mission: to ensure that every child, regardless of background, would have the knowledge and tools to build financial security and independence, she began, looking out at the attentive faces. Today, I'm proud to announce that our curriculum has reached over 1 million students in all 50 states. Applause rippled through the crowd. In the front row, Michael beamed with pride, Amara, now a poised 10-year-old, sitting beside him. Behind them sat Patricia, still elegant at 70, and Victoria, who had remained a valued colleague and friend through the years. But numbers only tell part of our story, Zara continued. The true measure of our success lies in the changed trajectories of individual lives. The first-generation college students who understood how to navigate financial aid. The young entrepreneurs from underserved communities who launched businesses with clear-eyed understanding of risk and opportunity. The families who broke cycles of debt and instability. As she spoke, slides displayed behind her showed images of students and teachers using the curriculum in classrooms across the country. Diverse faces engaged in learning that would shape their futures in tangible ways. When I started this journey, many people told me it couldn't be done, Zara acknowledged, her voice warm but firm. They said financial literacy was too dry to engage young children, too complex for widespread implementation, too niche to attract sustainable funding. She paused, allowing herself a small smile. Those people bet against us. They lost that bet. More applause, stronger this time. In the years since establishing the Independent Foundation, Zara had built something remarkable, an organization recognized nationally for its innovative approach and measurable outcomes. What had begun as a small program born from her own experiences had grown into a movement changing how financial education was approached across the country. After concluding her keynote address, Zara moved through the conference, connecting with educators and partners who had implemented the curriculum in various settings. Everywhere she went, people shared stories of impact. Students who had opened their first savings accounts, schools that had incorporated financial literacy across multiple subjects, communities that had seen measurable changes in banking access and credit scores. During a break between sessions, Zara stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The conference center overlooked a small lake, the water reflecting puffy white clouds against a perfect blue sky. She was contemplating the morning's success when she heard her daughter's voice. "Mom, we found you," Amara called, hurrying over with Michael following at a more measured pace. At 10, Amara was all long limbs and boundless energy, her hair in two puffs that bounced as she moved. She had Zara's determination and Michael's easy warmth, a combination that made her both a natural leader among her peers and a deeply empathetic friend. "Your speech was awesome," Amara declared, giving Zara a quick hug. "Especially the part about how money isn't just about being rich but about having choices." "Thank you, sweet pea," Zara replied, touched that her daughter had absorbed the core message of her work. "That means a lot coming from my favorite critic." "It really was excellent," Michael agreed, joining them. "Clear, inspiring, and authentic, just like you." After 12 years of marriage, he still looked at Zara with the same admiration he had shown when they first met, his love deepened by shared experiences rather than diminished by familiarity. Their family had evolved over the years but remained the center of Zara's world. Michael had become principal of his school in Montclair, implementing innovative programs that combined academic excellence with social-emotional learning. Amara was thriving in 5th grade, showing particular interest in both mathematics and theater, a combination that delighted her parents with its breadth. They had added to their family 3 years earlier, welcoming twin boys, Marcus and Malcolm, whose arrival had been unexpected but joyfully embraced. The toddlers were spending the conference weekend with Patricia, giving Zara and Michael a rare opportunity to focus fully on Amara and the professional milestone the conference represented. "There's someone who wanted to congratulate you," Michael said, nodding toward the conference center entrance where a familiar figure stood watching them with a slight smile. Richard Porter had aged well, his dark hair now threaded with distinguished silver at the temples. Beside him stood a girl on the cusp of adolescence, Lily, now 9, with her mother's striking features and her father's thoughtful expression. Over the years, their families had maintained a cordial if distant relationship. Occasional holiday cards were exchanged, and they had attended the same charity events a handful of times. The Porter Foundation and Freedom Financial Literacy had collaborated on several initiatives, their shared mission transcending the complicated personal history between their founders. "Zara," Richard greeted her warmly as he approached. "Congratulations on the keynote. You captured perfectly why this work matters." "Thank you," she replied sincerely. "I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you were focused on environmental initiatives these days." After selling Porter Technologies, Richard had indeed shifted his philanthropic efforts toward climate change solutions, establishing a venture fund for sustainable technology. It was yet another evolution in a life that had taken unexpected turns since his divorce from Zara. "I am," he acknowledged. "But Lily has become quite interested in financial education. She's implemented a modified version of your elementary curriculum at her school as a student project." The girl nodded, her posture reflecting the confidence of a child raised with both privilege and purpose. "It's been really successful," she told Zara. "We've helped 23 kids open their first savings accounts." "That's impressive," Zara responded, genuinely touched by the girl's initiative. "Very impressive, especially for someone your age." Amara, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward with characteristic directness. "Hi, I'm Amara. My mom says your dad used to be married to her, which is kind of weird but also interesting. Do you want to see the exhibit hall? They have a virtual reality game about starting a business that's actually pretty cool." The adults exchanged amused glances at Amara's straightforward approach. After a questioning look at her father, who nodded encouragingly, Lily agreed to accompany Amara. "I'll take them," Michael offered, understanding that Zara and Richard might appreciate a moment to talk privately. "We'll meet you at the lunch session." As the others walked away, Zara and Richard found themselves alone by the lakeside, an echo of their conversation at the Gala 5 years earlier, yet with even more distance from their shared past and clarity about their separate presents. "She's remarkable," Richard said, watching Amara's animated gestures as she talked with Lily. "Very much her mother's daughter." "Thank you," Zara replied. "Lily seems wonderful too, poised but with real purpose. Not just going through the motions." Richard nodded, pride evident in his expression. "We've tried to raise her with awareness of both her privilege and her responsibility. Her interest in your program has been entirely self-directed. She read about it in a school assignment and decided it was something she wanted to bring to her classmates." They talked for a while about their children, their work, the changes in their lives since their last significant conversation. Richard mentioned that Vanessa had launched a successful sustainable fashion line, transforming her industry connections into a platform for ethical manufacturing practices. Zara shared news of the foundation's international expansion, with pilot programs now running in several countries. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Richard asked suddenly, echoing the question Michael had posed years earlier after the gala. "If we had managed to grow together instead of apart?" The query didn't surprise Zara as much as it might have once. Time and distance had created space for such reflections without reopening old wounds. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I believe we each found the path we needed to become our best selves. The marriage we had wasn't helping either of us grow in the right ways." Richard considered this thoughtfully. "You're right, of course. I wasn't ready to be the kind of partner you deserved. Or the kind of father I try to be now." He paused, looking out over the lake. "I learned a lot from losing you, Zara. Painful lessons but necessary ones." "I learned from our time together too," she replied honestly. "About what I truly needed, what I was willing to compromise on, and what was non-negotiable." Those lessons helped me build a healthier relationship with Michael, a stronger foundation for our family. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, two people who had once shared the most intimate connection now linked by mutual respect and the distant echo of a shared history. "I'm glad you're happy," Richard said finally. "You deserve it, the success, the family, all of it." "So do you," Zara replied, meaning it completely. As they walked back toward the conference center, Zara reflected on the long, unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. The young waitress who had once been dazzled by Richard Porter's wealth and confidence could never have imagined standing beside him as equals, each successful in their own right, each finding fulfillment in ways that their marriage had never allowed. The afternoon passed in a blur of panel discussions, networking sessions, and planning meetings for the Foundation's next initiatives. By the time the day's events concluded, Zara felt both exhausted and exhilarated, tired from the intense schedule but energized by the tangible evidence of the Foundation's impact. That evening she, Michael, and Amara enjoyed a quiet dinner at their favorite restaurant near the conference center. As they shared highlights from their respective days, Zara felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. "Lily seemed nice," Amara commented between bites of pasta. "Kinda serious but nice. She's really smart about money stuff." "Like someone else I know," Michael teased gently, ruffling their daughter's hair. Amara rolled her eyes with preteen exaggeration but couldn't hide her pleased smile. "She invited me to visit sometime. Can I?" The question took Zara by surprise. The idea of her daughter forming a friendship with Richard's child represented a level of connection she hadn't anticipated. Yet as she considered it, she found no resistance within herself, only a sense that life had come full circle in the most unexpected way. "We'll see," she replied carefully. "If your schedules align and both families agree, it might be nice." Later that night, after Amara had fallen asleep in the hotel room's second bed, Zara and Michael talked quietly about the day's events. The successful keynote, the unexpected appearance of Richard and Lily, the possibility of the girls developing a friendship. "Life is strange," Michael observed, his arm comfortably around Zara's shoulders as they sat together on the small sofa by the window. 10 years ago, would you ever have imagined Amara and Richard Porter's daughter becoming friends?" "Never," Zara admitted with a soft laugh. "But it feels right somehow. Like we've all moved beyond the past to something healthier." Michael nodded, his expression thoughtful in the dim light. "You know what I realized today watching you give that keynote? Everyone who bet against you losing everything when you left Richard was focusing on the wrong things. The penthouse, the lifestyle, the status. They couldn't see what you were gaining by leaving." "And what was that?" Zara asked, curious about his perspective. "Yourself," he said simply. "The chance to become who you were meant to be, to build something authentic, to find love that truly saw you." He kissed her forehead gently. "For what it's worth, I think I got the better end of that deal. Richard may have had you first, but I get to have you at your most powerful, your most realized." His words warmed her heart, confirming what she had known for years, that with Michael she was truly seen and valued, not as an accessory or a reflection of his status, but as herself in all her complexity. The next morning, as they prepared to check out of the hotel and return to Montclair, to the twins waiting with Patricia, to their busy, beautiful life, Zara took a moment to stand at the window overlooking the city. From this height, she could see both where she had been and where she was going, the urban landscape where her journey with Richard had played out, and beyond it, the suburbs where she had built a new life with Michael. Everyone had bet that poor black lady would never divorce her billionaire husband. They had been wrong about that, and wrong about what would follow. In leaving behind wealth and status, Zara hadn't lost everything. She had found what truly mattered: authentic purpose, genuine love, and the courage to build a life that reflected her deepest values. As Michael and Amara joined her at the window, their reflections overlapping in the glass, Zara felt the profound rightness of her choices. The path hadn't been easy or straight, but it had led her exactly where she belonged, to this family, this work, this truth. "Ready to go home?" Michael asked, his hand finding hers. Zara smiled, squeezing his fingers gently. "More than ready. Let's go home." Home, not to a penthouse filled with designer furniture and emotional distance, but to a house warmed by laughter and shared dreams. To twin boys who would greet them with enthusiastic hugs, to a garden they had planted together, to neighbors who knew them as Michael and Zara rather than as the Porters. The poor black lady who had dared to divorce her billionaire hadn't ended up poor at all. She had found the true wealth that comes from living authentically, from building meaningful work, from loving and being loved for exactly who she is. As they drove home toward Montclair, toward the life they had built together, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she had won the most important bet of all, the bet on herself. The backyard of their Montclair home was transformed for Amara's 15th birthday celebration. Fairy lights strung through trees, tables covered with colorful cloths, and a small stage area where Amara's theater friends planned to perform later. It wasn't an extravagant party by society standards, but it was perfect for the confident, creative teenager who had grown into her own unique person under Zara and Michael's loving guidance. "Mom, have you seen my script?" Amara called from the back door, her hair now worn in long twists that framed her face beautifully. "The one with my notes for the performance?" "Check the dining room table," Zara replied, adjusting a vase of fresh flowers cut from their garden. "I think I saw it there earlier." At 15, Amara had blossomed into a remarkable young woman, academically gifted, passionate about social justice, and with a talent for bringing people together. Her interest in theater had evolved into serious study, with dreams of writing and directing plays that addressed important social issues. "Found it," Amara called, emerging from the house with the script in hand. She paused, surveying the decorated yard with appreciation. "This looks amazing, Mom." "Thank you." Zara smiled, touched by her daughter's gratitude. Despite being in the throes of adolescence, Amara had maintained the warm connection with her parents that had characterized their family life from the beginning. "You're welcome, sweet pea. Is Lily still coming?" "Yeah, her mom's dropping her off in about an hour. She's bringing her guitar for the performance." The friendship that had begun tentatively at the conference 5 years earlier had flourished despite the geographic distance between them. Lily Porter had grown into a serious, thoughtful teenager with musical talent and a passion for environmental causes that matched her father's current focus. The girls connected regularly through video calls and social media, occasionally spending weekends at each other's homes. Michael emerged from the garage carrying a cooler filled with drinks. At 50, he had the same kind eyes and genuine smile that had first drawn Zara to him, though his hair now showed touches of gray at the temples. He had been principal of his school for 7 years now, implementing innovative programs that had drawn positive attention from educators across the state. "The twins are cleaning up their room," he reported, setting down the cooler. "I told them no video games until it meets minimum standards of human habitation." Zara laughed, picturing their 10-year-old son's likely reaction to this ultimatum. Marcus and Malcolm were bundles of energy and curiosity, identical in appearance but distinct in personality. Malcolm was the thoughtful observer, taking everything in before making his move. Marcus was all immediate action and exuberant enthusiasm. Together they kept their parents constantly on their toes. "Did you remind them to put on clean shirts?" she asked. "The ones I left on their beds?" "Of course," Michael replied with a wink. "Though I make no guarantees they'll stay clean through the cake cutting." As they continued preparing for the party, Zara felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often washed over her in these domestic moments. Their life wasn't perfect. They had the same challenges as any busy family with active children and demanding careers. But it was rich with genuine connection, shared purpose, and the kind of love that saw clearly and accepted completely. The Freedom Financial Literacy Foundation had continued to grow under Zara's leadership, now reaching students in 12 countries and providing training for educators around the world. She had written 2 books, one for parents on talking to children about money, and one memoir about her journey from waitress to foundation leader that had become required reading in several business schools. Michael's innovative approach to education had been recognized nationally, with other schools adopting his model of integrated learning and community engagement. Their professional achievements complemented rather than competed with each other, each supporting the other's growth without resentment or jealousy. Guests began arriving for the party, Amara's school friends, neighbors, colleagues from both Zara and Michael's workplaces, and family members including Patricia, now 75 but still vibrant and engaged with her grandchildren. The backyard filled with conversation and laughter, the atmosphere warm and welcoming. When Vanessa arrived with Lily, there was no awkwardness, just the easy familiarity that had developed over years of cordial connection. While never close friends, Zara and Vanessa had established a comfortable relationship built on mutual respect and their daughter's friendship. "Richard sends his regrets," Vanessa explained as she helped arrange Lily's guitar case near the performance area. "He's at a climate conference in Geneva but asked me to give you this." She handed Zara a small wrapped package. Inside was a first-edition copy of one of the earliest books on teaching financial literacy to children, published in the 1920s, a thoughtful gift that acknowledged their shared professional interest without any personal complications. Zara appreciated the gesture for what it was, recognition from a former spouse who had grown into someone capable of genuine respect and appropriate boundaries. Their relationship had evolved from the intensity of marriage to the distant warmth of people who had once been important to each other and now occupied separate but parallel paths. The party unfolded beautifully, with heartfelt toasts from family members and performances by Amara's theater group. The highlight was a duet by Amara and Lily, an original song they had composed about finding your voice and standing up for what you believe in. Watching them perform together, Zara felt a complex emotion that mingled pride in her daughter with appreciation for life's unexpected circular patterns. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, Zara found a quiet moment with Patricia on the porch swing that Michael had built the previous summer. 15 years, her mother marveled, watching Amara laughing with her friends across the yard. I can hardly believe it. Seems like just yesterday you were telling me you were pregnant. I know, Zara agreed. Time moves so quickly. Patricia patted her daughter's hand gently. You've built a beautiful life, baby. Everything I ever wanted for you. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to Zara's eyes. There were times I wasn't sure I would make it, you know? When I left Richard, when I was trying to rebuild my career, even in those early days with Michael when I was still afraid to trust completely. But you did make it, Patricia reminded her. You had the courage to bet on yourself when nobody else would. That's the legacy you're passing to your children. Not money or status, but the courage to live truthfully. As evening fell and the party finally concluded, only family remained, the peaceful aftermath of celebration surrounding them like a warm blanket. The twins had fallen asleep on the living room sofa despite their best efforts to stay awake. Amara and Lily were still chatting quietly on the porch, making plans for future collaborations and shared adventures. Michael found Zara in the kitchen, putting away leftover food and tidying up the inevitable party debris. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder in a gesture of comfortable intimacy that still made her heart warm after all these years. Happy? He asked simply. Zara leaned back into his embrace, feeling the solid certainty of their connection. Completely, she replied. You? Always, he said, turning her gently to face him. Especially when I watch you shine like you did today, mother, leader, creator of this beautiful life we share. As they stood together in their kitchen, surrounded by evidence of the celebration they had created for their daughter, Zara reflected on the long, unexpected journey that had brought her here. From the diner where she had first met Richard, to the penthouse that had slowly become a beautiful prison, to the frightening leap of divorce, to the gradual rebuilding of her life on her own terms, each step had been necessary to arrive at this moment of profound contentment. Everyone had bet against her. The society women who had whispered behind their hands, Richard's family who had always seen her as an outsider, even friends who had worried she was giving up security for an uncertain future. They had all been wrong. The poor black lady who dared to divorce her billionaire hadn't lost everything. She had found her true fortune in a life built on authenticity, purpose, and love that saw her completely. A life rich not with designer labels and society galas, but with children's laughter, meaningful work, and a partnership of equals. As she and Michael joined hands to walk upstairs, pausing to carry their sleeping sons to bed and to check on the girls still deep in conversation on the porch, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she had won the most important wager of all, the bet on herself, on her own capacity for growth and happiness beyond the golden cage of her first marriage. In the quiet of their bedroom later, as Michael fell asleep beside her, Zara thought about the young woman who had once worked double shifts to put herself through college, who had dazzled a billionaire with her authentic spirit, who had found the courage to leave when that spirit began to dim in his shadow. That woman had never truly disappeared, even during the darkest times of her marriage. She had been waiting, gathering strength, preparing for the moment when Zara would choose herself again. And from that choice had flowed everything good that followed. The foundation that changed lives, the family that nurtured souls, the love that saw and celebrated her true self. The story that had begun with everyone betting against her had ended with the most surprising twist of all. By walking away from a billionaire's wealth, Zara Williams had found riches beyond measure. A life that was authentically, joyfully, completely her own. And that was the happiest ending she could ever have imagined.